It's a very good morning to you from a wet and stormy Johannesburg, Gauteng province here in South Africa. We've been battling with inclement weather here. Of course, the team is still full. Elvis President, Ken Mahamati and myself, Evan Yansemi here to bring you, or to be with you for the next 3 hours till midday, bringing you all the mop-up operations and the like. But Elvis, it's been a stormy couple of days. Let's just have a look at some of the pictures that have been coming in on social media.
And when you talk about storms here, it's all about cats, dogs, and a kennel thrown into it. It's raining here in Johannesburg last couple of days.
It looks like a tsunami, which is the thing that you pointed out. It looks like the aftermath.
Look at that. If you look at that, it reminds you of the tsunami back in the day. What happened? And look at that vehicles. There's vehicles in the rivers being, you can see there, turned upside down and mangled within the storm waters there. So it's a stormy day, stormy couple of days, and of course that posed the question as, are you adequately covered?
Yes, that's that's the question we're running here today. Of course, mop-up operations all over the province underway. Are you concerned about insurance payouts after the floods? A lot of people aren't even insured. Can you imagine that? Now, Elvis, you're going to be doing an interview a little bit later with regards to this. Cover is at the core of it, isn't it?
Very important. If you're not comprehensively covered, you might lose out. You might be thinking you're paying for insurance, but if you're not comprehensively covered, you might not be able to get your money back.
Are you concerned? That's the question. Are you concerned that you might not be covered? What are your concerns? Tweet it at SABC Newsroom to us. We'd love to interact with you on that score. But, of course, there's also another story concurrently, and we've been running a poll just to kind of gauge where you guys are at. It's around exam leaks. We've seen a lot of exam leaks. Of course, Matric exams are currently underway here in South Africa. And we ask this question because the Education Department is actually being, well,
the fingers being pointed at the Education Department from courses that's saying that the Education Department should be held responsible for these leaks because they got it out there and not the students. So the question we pose to you is, can the Education Department be held responsible for exam leaks?
Now, this all happened via WhatsApp, didn't it? so there's conjecture on how this thing fits together. How can something leak in Limpopo when it's being held in Johannesburg?
And, of course, going through on WhatsApp. Of all places.
Of all places. That's a world of technology we're living in. Well, it's going to be a busy Friday. There's lots happening. We'll keep you updated as stories develop and mop-up operations, of course, continue. Don't forget to answer that question at SABC Newsroom. But first, let's get updated with the morning's news with Elvis President.
Now, several provinces are bracing for further floods as more severe thunderstorms are predicted around the country. Meanwhile, search and rescue teams are still searching for a 3-year-old girl who's believed to have drowned during the flash floods in Alexandra, north of Johannesburg. And protesters turned out for a second day in cities across America to express continued opposition to the incoming president, Donald Trump, accusing him of racism, sexism, and xenophobia, amongst others. Those are all your headlines. Before we get to the news, let's find out from Kendall Makamate what's going to happen in a very sporting weekend. A very good morning.
Very good morning to you. In fact, I think a lot of people are looking forward to this weekend.
Yeah, Crackerjack weekend for South Africans especially.
100%, yeah, but I'm not sure which shirt I'm going to be wearing this weekend. I might be taking them off every now and then to support the next team that's going to be on my TV. Good morning to you. This is what we've got for you in the sports today.
Can we get away to a good start?
Day 2 of the Nedbank Golf Challenge, and hosted by Gary Players, underway. And first off was a trio led by Martin Keimer.
Brazil looking to double their advantage. They could well do here. They do. A goal for Neymar.
Brazil slay their World Cup demons in the Estadio Mineiro as they rekindle their Jogo Bonito, thrashing arch-rivals Argentina 3-0 in their 2018 World Cup qualifier.
We're an ambitious team. We want to be the #1 team in the world. So this game against South Africa on Saturday is another step forward.
The nation holds its breath as all 3 of South Africa's key senior men's national teams, the Springboks, the Proteas and Bafana Bafana, lock horns with formidable foes this weekend. All this and more I've got for you in the Sports Bulletin. Be sure to stick around for it, but for now, I do know that Elvis has got the news for you.
Thank you, Kendall. Top story this morning. More flooding is possible in several provinces as severe thunderstorms are predicted in Gauteng and parts of Mpumalanga, Limpopo, Northwest, the Free State and KwaZulu-Natal. Emergency teams are already mopping up after thunderstorms accompanied by hail caused havoc around Gauteng. Large parts of Pretoria East were left without power and an electrical storm caused more flight delays at OR Tambo Airport. Floods have already claimed 4 lives in Alexandra in the north of Johannesburg. Motorists and residents are being warned to avoid low-lying areas.
Local businesses counting the costs of the deluge. Losses estimated to run into millions.
I reckon we should be closed for plus minus a week or two. And, the damages, especially on my wheel alignment machines, that is extreme. It's about over R500,000.
And while some tried to resume operations, this man came back to retrieve his license from his car. A video of this woman watching her car also went viral. Authorities are cautioning residents as more rains are expected.
All our 29 fire stations are on high alert so that when it starts raining, they can respond and attend to life when life needs to be rescued. And we'll also be having our disaster management officials and managers patrolling the hotspots where we know that flooding may take place once it starts raining.
Mopping up operations are continuing. Mahlaku Komane, SABC News, Edenvale.
Meanwhile, a 3-year-old girl who was believed to have drowned during the flash floods in Alexandra, north of Johannesburg, is still missing. The toddler was swept away while she and her father had climbed up a tree to try and escape the raging waters.
A distraught mother waiting for news. Cynthia Chauge's 3-year-old daughter was washed away by the flash floods on Wednesday. The child presumed dead.
We survived after climbing over our home and then onto a tree. After 30 minutes, a tree branch broke off and our child fell into the floods and died.
Search and rescue divers were roped in.
Our swiftwater rescue team has been in the water and along the river banks just to check if maybe not he's alongside the river banks or even inside. We've traveled about 3 kilometers and we're still going to continue.
Around the settlement, a trail of destruction. Residents here picking up the pieces. Many have lost their homes.
I have nothing, just my 3-month-old baby. I lost everything in the floods.
This footage shows the destructive force of the torrent water. Shacks uprooted and cars swept away. Humanitarian group Gift of the Givers also stepped in. Siswetla is built along a flood line, but provincial government says there are plans to move residents to a safer area.
We are going to continue to remove. We'll probably have to fence off this area and put signs that people should not trespass, because you can see even on the other side of the river that people have really built on what is a flood line.
Authorities say those affected will be housed in temporary shelters in the area.
Some very warm conditions coming in, which lasted quite a long time. And convection built up, and we saw strong low-pressure systems coming along the eastern coastline, which just added to that. And all in all, we just got strong convection, which is rising air. Yeah. The faster the air rises, the bigger the storm will be, effectively. And up here, we have a lot of dust in the air, causes a lot of electrical activity. So what we just saw was a lot of rainfall in a very short period of time. That's what leads to the flash flooding.
Yeah, I mean, I'm seeing articles and headlines reading a once-in-a-century storm hits Joburg. Yeah. I mean, is it that rare here in Joburg? Could we see it happening? Because I know there's a lot of predictions for a lot more rain to come, but to that extent is the question we're asking.
Look, I'm not going to say that it's not going to happen in the next 100 years. It is more than likely to happen in the next 100 years. And we have seen rainfall this bad in the last 100 years. If you recall, just a few years ago, 2 or 3 years ago, we saw very intense, massive hailstones falling, a huge hail shower that fell in the east rand of Johannesburg as well. And people are saying the same thing about that. So events like this are happening, and they're happening more regularly, and that is, unfortunately, a symptom of climate change.
A symptom of climate change. Well, there's climate change in America too. This, as the US President Barack Obama and the President-elect Donald Trump held a 90-minute meeting at the White House in their first public step towards a peaceful transition to power. The meeting comes after the Republican businessman's surprise election victory. Obama said the two men spoke about foreign and domestic policy as well as the upcoming transition of power. Trump, elected on Tuesday, said that he looked forward to more meetings with Obama and said several matters were discussed. Later, Trump met with the Senate Majority Leader, Mitch McConnell, on Capitol Hill. Now, addressing reporters after his meeting, Trump said his top 3 priorities were immigration, healthcare, and big league jobs. Dozens of anti-Trump protesters, meanwhile, gathered outside the White House to demonstrate against Trump's triumph. Thousands of people have been taking to the streets in at least 10 U.S. cities, chanting, "Not my president," and "No Trump." Since Tuesday, the White House upset that he won. Now, that's your news for now. Today, we're talking about a number of things, and that includes education and, of course, leaks in the exams. Let's go over to Eben, and there's the poll that we run for you today. Can the Education Department be held responsible for exam leaks in Limpopo? So far, 87% of you are saying yes, the department should be held responsible. 13% are saying no.
Well, Elvis, I can report on the flip side of this. The Basic Education Minister, Angie Motshekga, she says she wants the criminals, yes, that's what you call them, criminals responsible for leaking Matric exam papers to be convicted. The minister gave an update on the impact of Maths Paper 2 being leaked in Limpopo and the consequences of this for the class of 2016. Now, last year, a paper leak in the Thohoyandou area of Limpopo also made headlines, and yet again this year, Maths Paper 2 found its way into the hands of pupils in Giani.
Giani High, one of the best performing schools in the province. A confirmation of a leaked paper might tarnish their good record. Information on how the paper leaked is still sketchy, but law enforcement agencies have been roped in.
We are aware and we can confirm that a Maths Paper 2 examination paper was found in possession of learners before it was written. In fact, it was during writing that we established that they had seen the paper prior to the examination happening, and our invigilators conducted further investigation after they observed learners behaving in a strange way, and they were then able to obtain more information about what took place, and we were alerted, and then we briefed up the team that has since been based in the province to try and get more information.
Last year, the province made headlines after a paper was leaked in the Vembe area. Limpopo province is in the news again. This time around, it's Giani High School, where learners apparently got hold of mathematics paper 2 before their exams on Monday. The Department of Education is still investigating the leak.
We have various mechanisms to be able to identify learners that have had prior access. We have what we call investigative marking, where we appoint trained people that are able to go through a script and pick up certain trends and patterns, which will indicate that such learners would have had access, prior access to the question paper.
As I said, we invest a lot into the security of the papers everywhere. Just put lots of money, lots of energy. We bring auditors. So it's a whole protected process. And then if somebody inside the system breaches the securities that we've put in place, it really undermines all the investment and the time that we put into security.
Mike Maringa, SABC News, Giani.
Now, in response to this, the Congress of South African Students say that it's not them but the government who remains to blame for the leaking of these papers. Ayanda Mokwana, who is the COSA's provincial chairperson in Limpopo, told us here at Newsroom that these criminals that the department speaks of are definitely not the students.
If there's any criminal that should be blamed for this, is the ones which are in the Department of Basic Education, because we believe strongly so that students cannot access the system of the Department of Basic Education, and it is unfair for students to be punished for the crimes which have been committed by the culprits which are in the Department of Education.
What evidence do you have that suggests that the department leaked the paper?
Well, I believe that anyone can just see that it's impossible for any normal learner from a village in Limpopo to be able to access a paper that is protected highly in the Department of Education, or any other learner in South Africa at that. As Congress of South African Students and as students, we know our capabilities, and we know that we are not criminals, and we condemn any person that is saying that students are criminals and that we are accessing question papers. We believe that the people that are giving us and the students, the other students, the question papers are in the Department of Education, and we are pleading with the Department of Education to make sure that they clean their house and check each and every person that has access to the question papers to make sure that they do not sell the question papers to our students.
Are you willing, as COSAS, to work with government and the department to find the people responsible for this leak?
Of course, because now when these question papers leak, we are looked at as the criminals. Our results are going to be withheld and our futures are going to be postponed. So we are willing to work with the department and the government to make sure that the people responsible for this, the people responsible for making our students vulnerable to this, pay for their crimes.
Why do you think this problem is persisting in Limpopo, though?
We strongly believe that the department is responsible also for this, because as you know, Limpopo is in the bottom 3 regarding the Matric result. This thing has started at the bottom. We find that students in our province specifically do not have teachers. They do not have proper infrastructures for education. There are schools which haven't been in class for 6 to 7 months. Now, when it's time for examinations, the Department of Education does not care whether students had no teachers, whether students have been striking or schools have been closed. What matters is that they're going to assess the students in the province, like the students in Gauteng, which have been going to school all along, students in Gauteng or any other province which have teachers all year long. Students in our province have a challenge in a way that our societies are not acclimatized to the education that the Department of Education is expecting our students to be receiving. You find that in other schools there are principals who still sexually molest students, and the Department of Education is not doing anything about that. But when it comes to the end of the year, they expect the same student that has been molested by the principals or the teachers in the school to sit for an exam, which is the same exam that is written by any other student who has been psychologically correct all year long. So we believe that the Department of Education should come to the ground and see the challenges which could be influencing students to be motivated to find question papers, because they do not care if students are ready or not. The bottom line is that question papers are coming. So we believe that if the Department of Education can ensure that students are ready and that the quality of education that the students are receiving in schools is at the same level as the question papers that the students would be writing, that would be fair for everyone, and that we believe that the issue of being in the bottom three also can also be addressed.
Now, the accusations that you just made with teachers molesting students and that sort of thing, have these cases been reported to the police?
Yes, these cases have been reported to the police, but you find that the students that are being molested are those that are from disadvantaged backgrounds. You find that if a student is molested by a principal, already there's a difference in power. You find that the principal has more power to manipulate the system into making him stay in the school. And you find that the Department of Education is in favor of the teachers rather than the students. We know of schools where students have been impregnated by principals and teachers, and the Department of Education is not doing anything about that. So we are pleading with the Department of Education to make sure that the issues that are affecting students at the bottom, the issues that are encouraging these papers to leak, the issues that are disturbing these learners from having confidence in themselves that they can pass, should be addressed. We believe that as students, we should be the ones which are always in the department's favor, but it looks like the department is always on the favor of the teachers, and student issues are never really addressed.
Have you addressed the issues with the department themselves?
Of course, what we do all the time is we make sure that we communicate with the department regarding any issue that we are facing. But you find that they always say they're investigating. You find that an investigation takes 3 to 4 years, and once they say they're investigating, they never come back to us. They never come back to us or the community to say that since you reported this case, that this principal is doing this and that. This is how far we've come with the investigation. They just promise investigations which we doubt could have taken place, because if an investigation has taken place, then there should be a meeting after to discuss the findings of that investigation.
Now, just lastly, Ayanda, can you give us an update how the students are coping with the current exams in Limpopo after the unrest in Vuwani?
The students in Limpopo are trying their best to make sure that they excel in these examinations. But as I've already mentioned, we have issues in our province which haven't really been addressed by the Department of Education. You know, not only schools have been banned in Vuwani, there are many other schools which have been banned in the province, but it looks like the Department of Education is waiting for 30 or 25 schools to be banned before they can address the issues. I can tell you of schools in Waterberg region, schools in Sekhukhune region, which have been banned because students have cries which have not been attended to. There are schools also in the province where they haven't been teaching in the whole year. So can you honestly say that students are ready for the examinations? All right. Honestly speaking, the students have never been ready for the examinations, but as victims, we've always been victimized with this system, so that regardless of the struggles that we are facing, we are forced to sit down for examinations. We are forced to be at the bottom 3. And at the beginning of the year, when they announce results, they always make promises of what will be happening or how they will be improving the results in Limpopo or any other province which is not in the top 5. Now, we can honestly see that the department is promising and promising and promising, but these promises never really reach the ground. We find that students in the province, some still do not have classrooms, and the issue of the leaking of question papers does not start in grade 12. You find that in grade 8 to grade 12 or in grade 7, students feel that they are never ready for examinations, which is what encourages cheating in examination rooms. Now, if a student has never been taught anything, for an example, geography for the whole year, and you expect them to sit for geography at the end of the year, how do you expect them to pass? Already that is a bruise in the learner's ego to say that I do not know anything, and I cannot afford to fail. As students in the province, we cannot afford to fail. We cannot afford to fail because we are from disadvantaged backgrounds. The education that we deserve is not being given to us, and we are willing to go to whatever lengths to make sure that we receive it. So. Regarding the state of readiness in the province, I could say that we have never been ready, but we are fighters. We hit the ground running, and that. Regardless of what is happening around us and the allegations which have been put to us, we are willing to move forward, and we are promising that we are going to perform to our utmost best to make sure that the province receives better results than last year.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for your time. Ayanda Mokwana, who is the COSAS provincial chairperson in Limpopo.
Yeah, some explosive claims by Ayanda being made in that clip. That's why we put up the poll to gauge your opinion and gauge where you are at with regards to this. Has this poll been updated yet? Doesn't look like it, but the latest one we have on screen right now. Can the Education Department be held responsible for exam leaks and, of course, all the other claims that you heard in that interview. At the moment, 87% of you say yes, they can be held responsible for sure. Of course, we're talking about exam leaks in particular in this instance, but a whole host of other explosive claims coming out of that interview. Now, in the weeks to come, we will investigate on the show a little bit and have more views on it in the weeks and months to come, because they are simply too explosive, some of those claims. But time for us now to take a look at what's on social media on this Friday. Happy Friday, by the way. It's always a happy day, isn't it? Now, the rain is so much needed here in South Africa. However, as you can see, some of the pictures incoming Joburg is just creating some terrible floods. And the hashtag, of course, Josie floods. Now, these images are from this week alone now. That, I can tell you, is Alexandra. That's Alex, just north of Sandton here in Johannesburg. That's the Yexke River. Of course, many people living around the rivers in Joburg. And when they come down in flood, you can see there the shacks blown away. Cars blown away. Buses drifting on top of a river. Seldom seen here in Johannesburg now. Gift to the givers are out. They are helping, and you know, of course, they always a whole host of tweets that come out there. You see the pictures of gift to the givers. Now, one of the nice tweets that's come out of the last couple of days from Kiamo Sekoto, and he says, "I feel like all of America's tears flooded South Africa," with a couple of giggles next to it there. And he, of course, calls himself Ammo. Kiamo Sekoto, on point. So sports news, big sporting weekend ahead of us this weekend. Bafana set up to go up against Senegal. Yes, Senegal. Sadio Mane, anybody know that name? He'll be up against Bafana. It's going to be an uphill battle. In international news, this weekend marks the one-year anniversary of the Paris attacks. Of course, there's a lovely picture with the Eiffel Tower. Now, a tribute to the victims of 13 November and their loved ones. We will not forget you, forever in our hearts. Then, of course, on a sad note today, musical icon Leonard Cohen. Yeah, the legend Cohen has passed away at the age of 82. He was known for his poetic lyrics. And here are his famous lyrics, some of them, actually, if you can have a look-see. Of course, it's been a kind of sad day in the entertainment world, for that matter, as Michael Bublé, his 3-year-old son Noah, has been diagnosed with liver cancer. There you see, what a wonderful family picture there you see. Of course, we're dealing with our own difficulties here in South Africa, Johannesburg in particular. It's flooding. Everywhere is flooding. Now, yesterday we asked you a question. Flash floods here in Joburg. Is poor maintenance to blame? Yeah, we always ask the tough question here on Newsroom. Sometimes it's not comfortable, but we have to deal with it. So we asked yesterday, flash floods in Johannesburg. Is poor maintenance to blame? 71% of the 355 votes that we got in, they say yes. Simple. Yes, blocked drains to blame, people living in drainage systems, people living under bridges and the like. That's what 355 votes, more than 70% say yes, poor maintenance. It's a bit harsh, but that's kind of Joburg. It's a tough city like that. Now, let's take a look at our picture of the day. This one comes from Barry Roo. Not that Barry Roo, I'm sure. But he says, next time, before you say men are trash, remember that these men stood together to help the ladies across one of Joburg's flooded streets. That's why we picked that as the picture of the day, because that's what it's all about. In times of difficulty, our true colors always come out. And look at this. That is a sense of community. That is helping each other out. That is what it should be all about at this time here in Johannesburg. So, if you haven't done your bit yet, go and have a look at what you can do. Our comment of the day, this one comes from Aviwe Brukwe. He says, Saturday is going to be an epic day for sport. All the best to the Boks. Bafana, proud South African. He didn't put in, of course, the Proteas. Now, the Proteas, they start just after midnight tonight They're in Hobart and they're playing against Australia. Let's hope they can beat them and take a 2-0, unassailable 2-0 lead in the series. For the Boks, it might be a little bit difficult. For Bafana, I don't know if they've got much of a chance against Senegal. Sadio Mane, just remember that name. Of course, our question of the day today, are you concerned about insurance payouts after the floods? There's been a lot of red flags that's been raised around this. Well, if you're covered, you should be okay. But it's got to be comprehensive. Anything else, and you won't see a cent. A little bit later, we'll look at that more extensively. But let's first take a commercial break.
Macro is lending a helping hand with big festive season savings that'll move you. Like the Totem 16-inch or 20-inch Mojo bikes for only $10.99. Save 200 Rand. Or save 200 Rand on the Bounce King 10-foot trampoline, now only $24.99. And zip away on a Zingo X100 electric scooter for $1,999. Save 300 Rand. Share in these and other big festive savings for home, for business, for life. Only at Macro. Big on life.
Welcome back. You're still with Newsroom. Time for us now to shift our focus a little bit further north here on the continent. Now, groundbreaking new research on Boko Haram has recently been released, and it was conducted by the Citizen Research Centre. Now, it's the first time researchers have managed to speak directly to ex-Boko Haram fighters in any number. The paper was released to the United Nations. The Citizen Research Centre is an organisation dedicated to investigating our societies. Now, for more on this specific research, we are joined from our Cape Town studio by the Managing Director of the Citizen Research Centre, Stuart Jones. Very good morning to you, Stuart. Thanks for being with us.
Good morning, Evan. Thank you.
Tell us about... Before we talk about you, tell us a little bit about the research that you've done with regards to Boko Haram. What are the things that kind of stood out, or the things that we should take note of?
Well, just to give you an idea of the scope of the study, it wasn't just with Boko Haram members. It did eventually culminate in that. But we spoke to 1,600 citizens in Nigeria across 5 different cities. We also spoke to 60 peace builders, as we called them, which were the heads of NGOs that were working towards peace in Nigeria. So they were the counter-narrative to Boko Haram. And then we managed to gain access to internally displaced persons camps, in which we were able to speak directly to ex-Boko Haram fighters. And we spoke to 10 of them in depth, and then 120 of them on a quantitative basis, where we administered a questionnaire to them. When it comes to the findings, the main finding, and probably the most disturbing one, when we asked people why they had joined Boko Haram, is that 57% of them said that they joined Boko Haram to get revenge against the Nigerian military, and that was a particularly disturbing finding.
Interesting what's come out with regards to the role of women within this organization as well. It wasn't quite what was expected, was it?
Yeah, the traditional view of women in Boko Haram, and we've seen this with Al-Shabaab in Somalia as well, because we do a lot of work around the continent with these kinds of organizations, is that people assume that women play a fairly subservient role within the organizations, basically as wives, euphemistically speaking, or as cooks and support. But what we found here, and at least half our sample was women that we spoke to, was that they were foot soldiers. About 40% of them, I think, were foot soldiers. They were working intelligence, about 20% of them in intelligence, and about 12% of them were working in recruiting. So this has the effect of starting to reevaluate the way that we look at how Boko Haram recruits, and also at how women are being used, if you like, within Boko Haram.
You looked at that recruitment also as part of the study. What were some of the other things that stood out with regards to how people, or how recruitment is done, for that matter?
Yeah, it was really interesting. You know, I think a few assumptions were undermined or shattered, if you like, with the study, given that it was the first time that people had been able to speak directly to Boko Haram members. As far as recruitment goes, the traditional wisdom holds that it happens in mosques, it happens in madrasas, that they're firebrand imams, as we call them, that spread the message and that recruit people. But what we found that it was a far more intimate experience. At least 60% of people that had been recruited into Boko Haram were recruited in their or other people's homes. They were recruited by close friends. They were recruited by family members. They were recruited sometimes by village elders. And so there was very little evidence of firebrand imams and mosque and madrasa recruitment. While mosques were gathering places sometimes in which recruitment did happen, it wasn't happening via the imams in the mosques.
Now, the research you've done happened some months after President Muhammadu Buhari was elected. Have you got any findings around that?
Yeah, it happened, I think, about 3 months after he was elected. It was towards the end of last year that we managed to gain access to these camps. Bear in mind that the people that we spoke to were very much ex-Boko Haram fighters. By virtue of being in these internally displaced persons camps, they're effectively internal refugee camps within the northeast of Nigeria. They had to renounce Boko Haram, and they were going through a rehabilitation process. But of course, what they were speaking about was their experiences in Boko Haram over the previous years. 48% of them had actually voted in the presidential elections, which we found really surprising. And we certainly got the feeling that more might have voted if they hadn't either been with Boko Haram at the time or if they had the means to vote. And then around 60%, or we would call it a 60% approval rating of President Buhari was evident even amongst Boko Haram members. But trust in all other levels of government was really, really low. And I mean all levels of government, right from municipality level all the way up to national government, was really low. So they had invested their hopes in one person. The implication of this was that Boko Haram members themselves, or rather ex-Boko Haram members themselves, were also keen on seeing Boko Haram eradicated.
So, Stuart, from where I'm standing now, if I'm consuming this, the previous picture we had, it was a picture of this insurgency group on the fringes of society, but your research really points out to a group that is much more part of Nigerian society and very much built into the fabric of that society. Is that more accurate then?
I think that's well put, yes. It's hard to say how integrated they are into Nigerian society. We're, of course, talking about the north of Nigeria and particularly the northeast of Nigeria. I think what we found that was particularly interesting was that the levels of trauma that are experienced by people there are extraordinary, unimaginable, on both sides of the fence. When we spoke to peace builders, people that had started or worked in NGOs towards peace, they had also experienced trauma. Almost all of them had experienced severe trauma during their lives, and they had made a decision to go to the one end of the spectrum, which was to work towards peace. Boko Haram members who had also experienced extreme trauma had gone to the other extreme. And somewhere in that path, there were generally key figures that played a role. So peace builders became peace builders because they met someone inspirational that moved them towards peace, whereas Boko Haram members met someone in Boko Haram that moved them towards Boko Haram. And so they're two sides of the same coin. And ultimately, what Boko Haram does is attempt to undermine, and does it very successfully, undermines the identity of African communities in northeast Nigeria, also in neighboring countries like Chad and Niger. By attacking those villages, it undermines the identity of the people that live there. Boko Haram itself has an identity, and when an identity void takes place, people tend to move their identity into another organization, and so outside of their community and into Boko Haram. And that really is how Boko Haram becomes embedded in the fabric of northeastern Nigerian society.
Now, your research comes with some key policy recommendations going forward. What came out of that?
Policy recommendations are always difficult. They seem simple, but they're incredibly difficult to implement. The main policy recommendations probably revolved around that concept of community identity. This is a lesson, I think, for us in South Africa as well, and probably for politicians around the world. We did regression analysis on the citizen surveys that we did, and we also spoke to the Boko Haram people about this. And it very clearly showed that the most important structures are small. They are the micro, not the macro.
Yeah.
They are at community level. The most important structures are strong local government, a strong sense of community, and that all of that builds resilience to recruitment from Boko Haram. And so if we want to build communities up, we need to make sure that there's strong local government from a municipality level upwards, that communities are developed and built. We also looked at the reintegration of Boko Haram members, which is quite a contentious issue, but we do hold that one of the most effective bulwarks against Boko Haram is actually reintegrating ex-Boko Haram members into their communities, because a lot of them were very, very disillusioned with what they had experienced in Boko Haram, and they actually become advocates against Boko Haram themselves within their communities. Other findings were that religious leaders are extremely important in the debate. They're trusted a lot by both sides, and so this means working with key religious leaders in the north of Nigeria is really important. And I think that was about it. If I can just check my notes. Oh, yes, military action. Well, we had found, let's not forget about that. So we had found, if we go back to the beginning of this interview, 57% of Boko Haram members joining Boko Haram because of some kind of trauma associated with the Nigerian military, whether that was their families being attacked, or whether it was they were on the fringes of Boko Haram already, and some of their friends had been attacked, and they had then joined. But that was a very worrying finding, and so one of the key recommendations also is that the rules of engagement are drawn up very carefully, and particularly when it comes to non-combatants, that they are handled really well.
Stuart, thank you very much for joining us today, my friend. Fantastic research, and it really helps us in the news business to kind of get the head around this entity that's a constant almost with us. I thank you for joining us.
Great pleasure. Thank you, Evan.
Stuart Jones, he's the Managing Director of the Citizen Research Centre. He came to us live from Cape Town. Now, in the next hour, we'll talk, well, a little bit wider around Boko Haram, especially with victims of Boko Haram, and now being, well, they're now being abused by members of the military in Nigeria and so forth. It's a discussion we'll escalate a little bit later, of course. Well, our question today, can the Education Department be held responsible for exam leaks? That's the poll we've been running thus far. We've also got some tweets coming in right now. 88% say yes, blame the Education Department. It's always quite easy to do that, isn't it? 88% say yes, it's them. Never mind the people who are using the information, I tell you. Let's take some of those comments coming out of... Let's take some of the comments that people are sending in. This one from BHZ97 says, Newsroom, of course. First it was the shortage of textbooks, now exam leaks. The whole department needs a reshuffle. Wow, it's easy to blame, to portion the blame. Continental says they are responsible for any leak. If there's no security feature secure enough arranged to prevent such crimes, blame them. The blame game continues. IG says people who are working for the Department of Education are the ones leaking their exam papers for quick cash. Corruption is everywhere in South Africa. It's everywhere in the world, they say. Now, this one from Libuani says, shoo. The real state of basic education in SA is shocking. So sad for disadvantaged communities. Newsroom. Of course, a little bit earlier we spoke to COSAS. You heard all the allegations that were thrown at the department. Next week we'll try and get the department back. And it's a discussion around education we continually have on the Newsroom show. We'll have Elijah in hopefully next week sometime to, well, respond once again to all of these allegations. But let's go to our Facebook page now and have a look what's on there. Of course, insurance companies, well, they've been inundated with claims following flash floods here in Gauteng. That's also our question of the day. Companies say clients can expect a delay due to a backlog caused by large volumes of claims being processed. Yes, the act of God principle is going to haunt you for the next couple of weeks, I tell you. The African National Park, South African National Park, say rhino poaching is stabilized in the Kruger. It's attributed the improvement to the number of security interventions, which include increasing the number of rangers, introducing tracker dogs, and upgrading equipment. And finally, all eyes will be on Lesotho in the National Assembly on Friday morning after a faction of the National Executive Committee of Prime Minister Pagalita Mosisili's party, the Democratic Congress, announced that it's withdrawing from the country's coalition. All of this on our Facebook page. You can also go to sabc.co.za/news. Now, let's take a quick look at front pages from around the globe. We'll start in New York. The Wall Street Journal reports that the president-elect's transition team ramp up its efforts to form his cabinet as more names were floated for some of the biggest jobs in the new administration, including the foe of financial regulation for the powerful position of Treasury Secretary. Should be interesting the next few weeks. Then in Australia, the Australian reports that Donald Trump's team kept the lines of contact open with Russian officials throughout the presidential election campaign. Very interesting, very scary for Americans to hear that. Then, the Jerusalem Post reports that U.S. President Barack Obama and the President-elect Donald Trump yesterday discussed the range of domestic and foreign policy topics at the White House during their first face-to-face meeting since Trump's stunning election victory earlier this week. Well, that's the tale of the tape. Of course, it always comes down to your money. At the end of the week, that's where we're at. Elvis is with the professor of money here in the newsroom studio.
Indeed, the professor of money, Yevon. Now, the week was undoubtedly Donald Trump's unexpected win in the U.S. presidential election on Tuesday. Originally, the voter polls had been predicting and the markets had been hoping that Hillary Clinton would win. Now, the shock victory by Donald Trump sent several financial markets into a temporary tailspin, and analysts are having to go back to the drawing board with their economic assessments. So, given Trump's radical stance on certain policy matters, what are the implications of the world economy as well as our own? To help us unpack these issues, we are joined again today in our weekly slot of The Economy by Professor Raymond Parsons of the Northwest University School of Business and Governance. Professor, very good morning to you and welcome.
Good morning, Elvis.
Was it a shock surprise that Donald Trump won the elections, and what is your overall reaction to it?
Well, Elvis, I think I must say I was a little less surprised than many other people, simply because although one was looking at it from a distance, looking at the polls and so forth, I felt that the formal polls were perhaps missing something. And when one looked at the social media and certain other events, one just felt that actually there was a chance that he was going to win. So even the night before, knowing I'd have to give some kind of sort of reaction, I was able to prepare some thoughts in advance. I'm not claiming any special insight. I think it was a very complex situation. But in the event, it has happened. It was a democratic election. And as Hillary Clinton said in her concession speech, you must now give the new president a chance to show what he can do.
Now, the markets have clearly been considerably rattled by Trump's victory, at least in the short term. And the prominent American economist, Professor Paul Krugman, has even hinted at a possible global recession. What do you see as the possible implications for the world economy?
Yes, I saw what Professor Krugman had said, and I think subsequently he in fact tweeted that perhaps he was going a little bit overboard in his first negative reaction, because he's been a very strong supporter of the Democratic Party in general and of their particular candidate in particular. So I think nonetheless there are some important issues here from an economic point of view. I'd say they're probably threefold as far as the new president is concerned. Firstly, his emphasis on the development of U.S. infrastructure. That's quite important for their economic development. Secondly, he's talked about very big tax cuts, which he hopes to be able to do. And thirdly, his trade policy, which is perhaps the most controversial. I would just say in regard to the infrastructural spending and the tax cuts, there are two issues that will decide that. And that is, firstly, what is the size of the U.S. fiscal deficit? How much can be done within the framework? There is room to maneuver, but how big is it? And secondly, we must remember that the U.S. Congress is not like our Parliament or the British Parliament. Once you have a majority, you do almost as you like. There are checks and balances. They won't necessarily, even as Republicans, agree with all his decisions. So I think that's part of the uncertainty. Then the other issue is trade policy. Yes. Now, here, I think there are grave risks which are facing us now. If the United States, under a new president, should opt for what I would call beggar my neighbor policies, whether it's against China or against Mexico, I think there's a grave risk of economic warfare or a tariff war breaking out. Those are risks on the horizon we'll have to watch. And we'll have to see what decisions are taken, once the new president takes over on the 20th of January.
If we talk about trade policies, that would not affect AGOA because that's up until 2025, if I'm correct.
Well, as far as South Africa is concerned, I think we want the multilateral system to work. That is under the World Trade Organization. A small open economy needs the protection of the rules of the game. So I think we'll be watching very carefully what the big elephants are doing and hopefully stay out of their way. More specifically, I doubt, although not everyone may agree, whether AGOA is very high on President Trump's agenda. I think he's got other much bigger priorities. And I think the important point here is that this arrangement is also entrenched in legislation and is supposed to extend until 2025. So I'm hoping that there is not a high risk that there will be any tampering with AGOA, and I understand also from a statement made by the U.S. ambassador to South Africa that he doesn't see any reason why there should be a change to the arrangements under AGOA.
Given the new developments in the U.S., what should South Africa's priorities be, you think, Professor?
Elvis, I think they must be what you and I have emphasized here before, but even more urgently. In a Trump uncertain world, we need to focus even more on what we've committed ourselves to do. Firstly, to get our house in order sooner rather than later. And secondly, to take into account that the credit rating agencies are here this week, and they will be announcing a decision shortly as to whether we're going to be downgraded or not. We've got to make every effort, as the Minister of Finance has said, to avoid that message going out that we have been downgraded. And I think this is even more important now, given the uncertainties that are being generated by the new presidency in the States.
And a final thought, Professor.
Well, I think what's important here, if we stand back and think of what this important political development in the United States is, we've got to understand very clearly that a Trump presidency is the new normal for the world, for the States itself, and even for South Africa. We've got to either adapt or offset what we think might happen, and we've got to ensure that our economic interests are protected. And for that, we need a strong and less vulnerable economy. So all the things that we have promised to do, over which we have control, let us reduce or offset the uncertainty that's being currently generated by the political change in the United States by ensuring that we lower our domestic policy uncertainty and get this economy moving. So that message, I think, is reinforced by what has happened in the United States.
But how do you protect that economic interest that you mentioned?
You implement what you have said you would do. Our National Development Plan is there. It will strengthen our economy. It will make our economy bigger, stronger, and better. Let us implement it and do it on the basis not of the factors over which we have no control, such as who is in the White House, but the factors over which we have control here and where we can make a difference sooner rather than later.
That was economist Professor Raymond Parsons from the Northwest University School of Business and Governance, the SPG, in our weekly slot of The Economy.
Yeah, that's the money in the markets. Always comes down to that. But after that, we do get a little bit of fun in life. Yes, awesome sporting weekend looms as all three of our national teams will go toe-to-toe with some of the best in the business in their respective codes. Of course, first up, the Proteas, who last week smashed Australia in Perth. Kendall is here, and he thinks it's not going to be plain sailing this week. Wow, what do you think, Kendall?
No, definitely not. I mean, a lot of people talk about Hobart as an unpredictable wicket, and South Africa, I don't think these guys have played there yet. So
only two of them have played there. I think it's JP Dumini's the one and another.
Yeah, and that's just it. And that's just
and
it.
Hash, I think.
Exactly, that's just it. You know, these are the old timers in the team who've actually got the experience of that wicket. With that said, Dean Elgar had a little bit to say about how, you know what, they're not going to go into this test thinking, yeah, you know, the fresh of a thrashing of Australia, it's going to be plain sailing. They know that Australia are going to be looking, with their backs against the wall, they're going to be looking for revenge. Because we know they've been looking for revenge since they were last year in South Africa. And they got thrashed out in Australia, so they'll be trying to see if they can get one over.
Listen, before I let you go on this thing on the cricket thing, think. There's a whole talk around AB de Villiers wanting to come back, wanted to come back for the third test. They told him no. When AB comes back, where must he bat? Because JP's got the number 4 slot now.
Well, look, I mean, we all know that our best batsman needs to be at number 3.
Okay, but that's Hashim. I say he should open the batting. He should do a Sachin Tendulkar and go to the top of the order and change the game and smash them around. That's what I'm asking AB to do. Be a team man. You see this team is working.
Let's talk about the captaincy. Well, should go back to him or should Faf hold on to
discussion. Faf is going to be the captain. Yeah. He's proven in a short period he's one of the best captains in the world. I
agree.
And I think one of the best. He's going to be one of the best in the history of South Africa. But moving on, a couple of other games, of course, speculative this weekend.
Yeah.
The Boks and Bafana, are they going to get hidings of note?
Oh, look, we know like Eddie Jones knows his counterpart really well. They both worked with Jake White in the 2007 World Cup winning team. So, and having said that, Eddie Jones's England have been on a high. They've been doing extremely well, and they're looking at being number 1 in the world. And only the Springboks are one of a step closer to get in there. And I think it's going to be very difficult for the Springboks to put in a good performance
The English
tomorrow.
are a team full of confidence, no doubt. Yep. Bafana quickly, Sadio Mane, hat-trick against Bafana. Is that what you've seen?
Not a hat-trick, but Itumeleng Khune is going to be hard put to defend against a resurgent and extremely powerful Senegal. And I'm hoping that we get something better than a 2-0 or a 1-0 that we win. We're hoping for it.
Yeah, we hope for it always. Of course, Shakes Mashaba said this week that Itumeleng Khune is one of the best keepers in the world. Shakes, you will talk yourself out of a job soon, my friend. Anyhow, let's go to Phil now for the weather.
Yeah, thank you very much. Well, let's take a look at that weather. We're going to start off with Southern Africa, and we're going to start off with its rainfall. Of course, this is the hot topic right now. We saw flooding a couple of days ago around the Highveld area, not only Johannesburg, but some surrounding areas as well. Well, for today, we're also expecting showers and thunder showers, and that continues around the interior of South Africa, its northeastern interior. In fact, we do have a weather watch for you, and that is issued by the South African Weather Service. It is for conditions which are going to lead to some severe thunderstorms. So please do be aware of that, and do prepare yourself for that as well. It's over most of South Africa's eastern interior there. Towards the rest of Southern Africa, well, so far we're just seeing a little bit of drizzle coming in towards the northeastern parts of Namibia. Botswana getting some rainfall there as well, and of course a lot of rainfall forecast for Zimbabwe for today. As we move through the afternoon and into the evening, of course, this is where it intensifies, and this is where we see those stormy systems really playing a role in our weather, especially in South Africa's northeast there. By tomorrow morning, still seeing isolated showers over most areas of South Africa's east, as well as coming in towards the western parts of Zimbabwe and the central regions there, as well as the east of Botswana. It's going to be a bit of a rainy one, but let's take a look at what's going on in terms of your temperatures. Bloemfontein peaks at 30 degrees and Pretoria at 29. So we are still going to have a fairly warm day as we see the sun starting to come out during midday. Into the afternoon, though, late afternoon, we're going to see that rainfall coming in. It's going to bring temperatures way down once again. Take a look at Durban, only a 21-degree maximum. It's going to be very mild there, and it is going to be raining as well. Very wet day forecast in Durban, but a drier one along the southern coastline. Temperatures here reaching really not much higher than the 20-degree mark for the most part. Cape Town getting up into the higher 20s, and a sunny day forecast there. So great weather forecast for Cape Town. Well, moving on in towards the rest of southern Africa, Gaborone peaks at 38 degrees Celsius, so very, very warm there. The rainfall continues up towards Bulawayo, Harare, temperatures into the 30s in these regions, and even further forward into the week, we're going to see those conditions continuing as well. Now, moving further north, we're going to see that rainfall continuing once again all the way throughout Central Africa. No surprises here, a very, very wet one forecast for the central regions there. Congo-Brazzaville expecting a lot of rainfall, and that peaks later this afternoon, as you can see, just south of Brazzaville in this area along the border there with Angola. So it's going to be a wet one. Moving into your temperatures, well, it's going to be a warm one as well. Many areas. Bangui peaks at 37 degrees. Temperatures in Brazzaville and Kinshasa 29 and 30 degrees respectively. Lots of cloud cover throughout the region. This is where we're going to leave your weather for now, but have yourself a wonderful day.
Now, this is Trends, of course, your one-stop serving of all that's juicy and trending in the world of entertainment and showbiz. My name, of course, is Refiel Wemwilo.
I'm Dr. Sello Mutaung, and this is Health Talk.
A very good morning and welcome to Media Monitor. I'm your host, Alicia Jolly.
My name is Dumile Matters.
My name
is Mpho. What time is it? It's question time.
For your daily dose of current affairs, tune in to the SABC News Channel.
Yeah, hello again, everybody. Welcome back. It's just gone 10 o'clock. We just brought you a complete weather update. Time for us now to take a look at more news. Myself and Kendall Makamati is here. Kendall, busy sporting weekend ahead, isn't it?
Massive sporting weekend. If you're a South African sporting fan, you're going to be in front of the TV the entire weekend. Springboks, Proteas, as well as Bafana. Who's going to win?
There's also the Nedbank, the $1 million is happening at Sun City. I'm going to go there on Sunday to have a look at some of these great players. But today, of course, we ask you a question of the day. We've seen massive storms here in Johannesburg. So are you concerned about insurance payouts after the floods? Take a look at some of these pictures. Incredible pictures. Looks like a tsunami hit Joburg, to be honest.
Absolutely. Looks like these two were put through the mill. I mean, look at the level of the water. I know the other day we saw cars spinning in this deluge that hit Joburg. It's actually quite concerning to see how quickly something like this can happen.
Yeah, there you have it. That's the question of the day we ask you. Concerned about insurance payouts? Do you think your insurance will pay out? Well, let's have a look at what some of you are telling us right here. Ikononato, yes, he says, Newsroom, I'm certain insurance companies will give these people a lot of headache with more delays on their claims. Yes, that is the discussion. Shortly, in this very hour, we will talk to insurance underwriters to give us an idea how this process works, and even if it is going to be as difficult as what it looks like. Act of God, Kendall.
Yeah, well, it wasn't act of God, but tell you what, we do know that sometimes it takes a bit longer than you want it to. And I see we've got a bit of a pause going on as well.
Yeah, there were some explosive claims a little bit earlier on the show, of course, that the Education Department should be held responsible for exam leaks. They talk about impregnating of students alike, some explosive claims. Right now, our viewers, 108 of them have voted in the first hour or so. They say 88% of them say yes, exam leaks. The department must take full responsibility for that. Of course, you guys have always also been tweeting us on this very question. Let's take a look at some of the tweets that you're sending in so that we can have a look-see as to what people are talking about.
First one up, of course. First it was the shortage of textbooks, and now it's exam leaks. The whole department just needs a reshuffle.
Tough words, eh? IH Nazo says they are responsible for any leak. If there's no security feature secure enough arranged to prevent such crimes, blame them.
I think it's fascinating that it was done through WhatsApp, that social media has taken over like that. And Sliza Pila says people who are working for the Department of Education are the ones leaking the exam papers for quick cash, he claims. Corruption is everywhere in South Africa.
Yeah, that's what it is. This one from Liboani says, "Shoo, the real state of basic education in SA is shocking. So sad for disadvantaged communities." Newsroom, yeah. Keep it coming. We love you to interact with us. We love to give you your voice on this very show. That's what the new world of news is all about. Your views. Now, time for us to take a look at the morning's top stories. Several provinces are bracing for further floods as more severe thunderstorms are predicted around South Africa. Meanwhile, search and rescue teams are still searching for a 3-year-old girl who's believed to have drowned during flash floods in Alexandra, north of Johannesburg. Protesters turned out for a second day in cities across America to express continued opposition to the incoming President Donald Trump, accusing him of sexism, racism and xenophobia. Those are your top stories on this very channel, SABC News. Right now, this is the Newsroom show. Let's go over to Kendall ahead of what's going to be a cracking sporting weekend.
I know where I'm going to be finding you on Sunday. You're going to be out at Sun City for the
Yeah, I'll
Newsroom
be
Golf
out at
Challenge?
Sun City, going to watch a little bit of golf in the heat there. Hopefully I don't come back too thin.
Or too brown, for that matter. Good morning to you. This is what's coming up in the sports today.
Take it away to a good start.
Day 2 of the Nedbank Golf Challenge hosted by Gary Player is underway, and first off the tee was a trio led by Martin Keimer.
Brazil looking to double their advantage. They could well do here. They do. A goal for Neymar.
Brazil slay their World Cup demons in their Estadio Mineirão as they rekindled their Jogo Bonito, thrashing arch rivals Argentina 3-0 in the 2018 World Cup qualifier.
We're an ambitious team. We want to be the #1 team in the world. So this game against South Africa on Saturday is another step forward.
And the nation holds its breath as all 3 of South Africa's key senior men's national teams, that's the Springboks, the Proteas and Bafana Bafana, lock horns with formidable foes this weekend. All this and more at about 10:40. I'll also be chatting to Dumisa Makali to try and see if we can preview that match out in Hobart for tomorrow. But all this, 11 at 10:40. For now, it's back to Evan Scott News.
Yeah, thank you very much to Kendall. He'll be back at around 10:40 to give you a complete update and look forward into what will be a busy weekend. As you've seen now, our top story is a very concerning one as more flooding is possible in several provinces as severe thunderstorms are predicted in Gauteng and parts of Mpumalanga, Limpopo, northwest the Free State as well as KwaZulu-Natal. Now, emergency teams are already mopping up after these storms accompanied by hail, causing havoc, especially in the Gauteng province. Now, large parts of Pretoria East were left without power, and an electrical storm caused more flight delays at the OR Tambo Airport. Floods have already claimed 4 lives in Alexandra in Johannesburg. Motorists and residents are being warned to avoid low-lying areas.
Local businesses counting the costs of the deluge. Losses estimated to run into millions.
I reckon we should be closed for plus minus a week or 2. And, you know, the damages, especially on my wheel alignment machines, that is extreme. It's about over R500,000.
And while some tried to resume operations, this man came back to retrieve his license from his car. A video of this woman watching her car also went viral. Authorities are cautioning residents as more rains are expected.
All our 29 fire stations are on high alert so that when it starts raining, they can respond and attend to life when life needs to be rescued. And we'll also be having our disaster management officials and managers patrolling the hotspots where we know that flooding may take place once it starts raining.
Mopping up operations are continuing. Mahlaku Komane, SABC News, Edenvale.
Now, meanwhile, a 3-year-old girl who is believed to have drowned during the flash floods in Alexandra, north of Johannesburg, is still missing. The toddler was swept away while she and her father had climbed up a tree to try and escape the raging torrents.
A distraught mother waiting for news. Cynthia Chauge's 3-year-old daughter was washed away by the flash floods on Wednesday. The child presumed dead.
We survived after climbing over our home and then onto a tree. After 30 minutes, a tree branch broke off and our child fell into the floods and died.
Search and rescue divers were roped in.
Our swiftwater rescue team has been in the water and along the river banks just to check if maybe not he's alongside the river banks or even inside. We've traveled about 3 kilometers and we're still going to continue.
Around the settlement, a trail of destruction. Residents here picking up the pieces. Many have lost their homes.
I have nothing, just my 3-month-old baby. I lost everything in the floods.
This footage shows the destructive force of the torrent water. Shacks uprooted and cars swept away. Humanitarian group Gift of the Givers also stepped in. Siswetla is built along a flood line, but provincial government says there are plans to move residents to a safer area.
We are going to continue to remove. We'll probably have to fence off this area and put signs that people should not trespass, because you can see even on the other side of the river that people have really built on what is a flat line.
Authorities say those affected will be housed in temporary shelters in the area.
We had some very warm conditions coming in, which lasted quite a long time. And convection built up, and we saw strong low-pressure systems coming along the eastern coastline, which just added to that. And all in all, we just got strong convection, which is rising air.
Yeah.
The faster the air rises, the bigger the storm will be, effectively. And up here, we have a lot of dust in the air, causes a lot of electrical activity. So what we just saw was a lot of rainfall in a very short period of time. That's what leads to the flash flooding.
Yeah, I mean, I'm seeing articles and headlines reading a once-in-a-century storm hits Joburg.
Yeah.
I mean, is it that rare here in Joburg? Could we see it happening? Because I know there's a lot of predictions for a lot more rain to come, but to that extent is the question we're asking.
Look, I'm not going to say that it's not going to happen in the next 100 years. It is more than likely to happen in the next 100 years. And we have seen rainfall this bad in the last 100 years. If you recall, just a few years ago, 2 or 3 years ago, we saw very intense, massive hailstones falling, a huge hail shower that fell in the east rand of Johannesburg as well. And people are saying the same thing about that. So events like this are happening, and they're happening more regularly, and that is, unfortunately, a symptom of climate change.
Symptom of climate change, of course, also means that insurance companies have to kind of step up to the plate, as it were. We've asked you this question today. What do you think? Are you concerned? Do you have concerns about insurance payouts over the next couple of weeks, really? Now, I can tell you that insurance companies have been inundated with claims already following the flash floods in Gauteng the last couple of days. Companies say clients can expect a delay due to the sheer backlog caused by the large volumes of claims that are being processed right now. For many people, the only way to come back from this disaster would be if insurance companies honoured their contracts. Now, for more on the insurance side, we are joined on the line by an insurance expert, Lizette Erasmus from Integrisure. Very good morning to you, Lizette. Thank you for being with us.
Good morning, and it's only a pleasure.
Lizette, people are already complaining that insurance companies have declined to cover their claims. Talk to us a little bit about short-term insurance and what sort of cover do you need in case of this kind of flash flood?
I'm quite surprised about the comment that there are claims being declined already.
Mm.
But in terms of your comprehensive cover, it's always wise to understand what is the terminology in terms of comprehensive cover, what insured perils are covered, because insurance cover provides cover for accidental, unforeseen events, of which your natural disasters, your storm, flood, hail, lightning is usually part of. So in terms of the cover that we provide, yes, it's definitely covered. The major thing is for anybody who enters into a short-term insurance contract is to make sure that they understand the cover that they're purchasing, what it entails, what your excesses would be in the event of a loss, and also what steps are required to be taken as soon as a loss has occurred. For us, obviously, it is to assist the client to prevent any further losses and to minimize the loss as quickly as possible.
Lizette, do you think South Africans understand their insurance contracts, and do you think people sort of do enough research when they go into a relationship with an insurer?
I don't think consumers familiarize themselves enough or take enough time to read their wordings and to understand the cover. You know, it is almost, I want to say, a grudge purchase for the reason that you don't see the cover or the product that you're purchasing, and you only experience your product once you have a claim. And if you have not familiarized your cover and you understand what you're covered for and what it will happen at a point of a claim, you then very often have clients that are disappointed because of the fact that they haven't done their homework. They have gone for the cheapest option, which is in some cases costs you extra money at the end of the day. So it's very important for you to understand, do comparisons in the market, to familiarize yourself in order to make sure that you have the best combination of the product, the price, and the service at the end of the day.
Now, Lizette, over the next couple of weeks and months to come, there's no doubt there are going to be quite a few claims that are going to be declined. That's just the nature of the business. But those people who are on the wrong side of this torrent, as it were, what alternatives do they have?
My advice to any insurance consumer whose claim was rejected by the insurer is to firstly follow the internal complaints resolution, which should be available, and it must be easily accessible to the consumer. And the next step then would be to consult the short-term insurance ombud. It is free of charge. The information should be on all consumers' short-term insurance policy schedule. It's a requirement that the information must be reflected there. It's free of charge, and they then can lodge a complaint, and the ombud will then investigate the complaint, and he is totally impartial in this whole process, and he will then evaluate, get information from the insurer, and he will make a ruling in terms of this specific case.
Now, Lizette, if you could leave us today with one gold nugget to keep in mind during all of this as an expert, what would that gold nugget be?
Please make sure that you update your cover on an annual basis. Review your sums insured, especially in terms of buildings. Consumers do not take into account the impact of inflation as well as the change in exchange rate. So please make sure that you are adequately insured. Your sum insured is enough to replace the property that has been lost or damaged.
Thank you very much for joining us today. That was Lizette Erasmus from Integrisure talking to us about the concerns that you might be having after these flash floods that we've seen in and around Johannesburg over the last couple of days. Very concerning. Now, shifting our focus completely, the ANC is in danger of losing one of its support bases in the rural areas if the Congress of Traditional Leaders' threat to withdraw its support is anything to go by. Now, Continental has given the ruling party a list of demands within 60 days, or it will withdraw its support from the ANC. Continental wants President Jacob Zuma to pardon the incarcerated Abatembu King, Buyeligaya Dalindyebo, and recognize traditional courts amongst their long list of demands. They have threatened to form their own political party if the ANC does not respond positively to all of these demands within 60 days. Now, a little bit earlier, we spoke to the Continental President, Kgosi Setla Morago Tobejane.
We are demanding that President Zuma should or must give King of Abatembu Buyeligaya Dalindyebo a presidential pardon. For one reason is that when you are imprisoning a sitting king, you are overstepping. You are deliberately disorganizing the stability of the nation that that particular sitting king is leading. And in this regard, the imprisonment of King of Abatembu, you can't even ask anyone to tell you. It bears testimony that ever since he has been, imprisoned, the Abatembu nation have been, a nation without a leader, a nation without a head. And as a result of that, there's no stability. The lives of the people are threatened by, instability of all those who are feeling in the absence of the king. They are entitled, to take over. Mm-hmm. We would have not have this if we were saying the king is not there basically because of the natural retrogression. Mm-hmm. But the fact that under democratic government that it knows that the reason for, amongst other, fighting for, getting the democracy we are fighting for was about to reinstate and, bring back the dignity of our kings and traditional leaders together with their communities. Now, it is said that in this democratic dispensation, we continuously applying foreign laws that we imprison our kings based on for reasons that we, all of us, knows that we attain democracy, but we have not yet worked on the policies and in particular laws that will deal with the institution of traditional leadership. Yes. And the ANC in particular, it has never developed a policy relating to how do they want to deal with issues of traditional leadership. Now, it is in that context that we are saying he must be provided a presidential pardon.
Now, if the president does not give the king the pardon that you are requesting, are you going to leave the ANC and form your own party of traditional leaders?
Look, before the elections, the local government elections, members, the National Executive Committee of Contralesa, were threatening and then pursuing us that we must pronounce that we are not going to vote alongside the ANC if they don't provide King of Abatembo presidential pardon, which we negotiated. We agreed that the time it's too short, it might not help us to achieve all what we wanted to achieve. And this demand is part of a list of demands that include the issue of title deeds of lands that we are residing in, that we need to be provided with title deeds, which were the fundamental requirements for the liberation of this country. So indeed, if the ANC does not see us that important, we will equally not see them to be important to us. We'll have to find a way of how do we obtain political power to make sure that we influence decisions that will make South Africa to become a real African state and get decolonized in absolute, position. Because where we are now, we are nursing and massaging, romancing what you call the colonizers, policies that they've left us to inherit. We seem not to do as we were supposed to make sure that our people finally achieve the logical conclusion of total liberation, and not only liberation as in the form of voting, in terms of their thinking, in terms of the way they are living their life, the way they are practicing their systems of governance and others.
President Jacob Zuma's answer on his process for pardoning people with criminal records was not accepted by the DA in Parliament recently. Now, during a question sitting, DA MP Glynis Breitenbach had asked a supplementary question to another MP's follow-up question on the written reply President Zuma had given about presidential pardons. Breitenbach said there was a perception that the approval of presidential pardon was based on political considerations. She asked the president what the rational grounds were for pardoning Boko Nansi, the husband of the NPA's Nomgcobo Jiba, on theft in 2010. Now, Contralesa in the Eastern Cape has applied to President Jacob Zuma for a presidential pardon. Dalindyebo filed for a review of his case in the Constitutional Court in February of this year, but this was also denied. Now, for clarity on these cases and what exactly a presidential pardon entails, we are joined now in studio by Ngobizita Mlilo, who is a human rights lawyer at Mdluli Attorneys. Very good morning to you, sir. Thank you for being with us.
Good evening, good morning, and it's a pleasure to be here.
Now, for those of us that don't know, please explain to us a presidential pardon, what it is.
The irony of this thing, maybe let me start from there, is that presidential pardons have a history in monarchical governments, that kings used to use their powers as monarchs to forgive their subjects, as it were, for the transgressions that they would have committed. So it is quite ironic that you're talking about presidential pardon in the context of a king.
Yeah.
But what has happened in South Africa is that evolution of the powers to pardon emanating from a monarchical government has now been constitutionalized. So the power to pardon is now a constitutional power that is vested on the president. Essentially what it means is that notwithstanding that the person concerned has been convicted by a competent court, the president, given his executive power as enshrined in Section 82K of the Constitution, is now empowered, as it were, to reverse the decision of the court. So you would understand that we have three branches of government: the executive, the judiciary, and the legislature. And all these structures of government operate independent, but supporting each other with different responsibilities. So essentially what happens in a presidential pardon is that the executive almost interferes in what is otherwise a judicial function, in the sense that the president then intervenes and, as it were, pardons, if we use the ordinary grammatical meaning of the word, pardons the convicted person. So in the case of the king, what essentially would happen is that the president would then say, you are essentially forgiven for the crimes that you committed. You can open the doors of prison and go home.
Yeah, the irony is what stands out there ultimately. But let's talk about who qualifies. That's the question actually we've got on screen. Who qualifies for a presidential pardon?
In South Africa, there was the case of President of the Republic of South Africa versus Hugo. It is the first case that dealt with the powers of the president to pardon. And in that case, President Mandela had pardoned certain prisoners who were females. Because he considered it necessary that they must be released from prison and go and look after their children. So essentially, there is no one who does not qualify. Or put it that way, in the sense that it is an open and blank check that is available to the president. He can exercise his discretion, and it's discretion in the absolute sense that he can do essentially what he wants. If he thinks that X must be released from prison, X will be released from prison. Of course, it has to be preceded by an application that the president, the person concerned does. But the president has absolute discretion as to who he can pardon. He can make... he can take certain factors into consideration, factors like the nature of the offense for which the person was convicted, the circumstances under which the offense was committed, the personal circumstances of the person concerned, whether or not there's any public interest or benefit that will be derived from the person being released. But essentially, it is a blank check. So as it were, from a legal perspective, the king is knocking on the right door. Whether or not politically you'll achieve it is a different question.
Yeah, let's quickly talk about in the king's instance. I'm sure you've had a look at the king's at the king's case. Well, what are his chances in this instance, you think?
His chances are as how long is a string, in the sense that it is the absolute discretion of the president. The president can make any decision he so, which is as long as that decision is constitutionally justifiable. In other words, it must not be influenced by factors which are extraneous to the Constitution. For instance, he cannot be bribed, he cannot do it because there's a personal benefit to him, but otherwise it is up to the president to decide whether or not he wants to grant him pardon, given some of the factors that I've indicated. So how his prospects of success are good, at the same time they are bad, because it really depends on what the president decides.
Now what normally is it normally pardons are granted towards the end of the end days of a presidential stint? What do you make of this kind of call this early? It's a little bit early to make this kind of call, isn't it?
Well, no, pardon can be granted at any point. Like I'm saying, it's an absolute discretion that the president has. He can grant that pardon to anyone under whatever circumstances. Of course, he has to apply his mind rationally to what he's doing. So it is not a time-bound circumstance. So there's a distinction between parole and presidential pardons. Paroles are the ones that require that the convicted person must have served for a particular period of time. A presidential pardon is an absolute power that is vested in the president in terms of the executive power that the president has in terms of the Constitution. So it is not time-bound. It can be granted at any moment.
Now, this is South Africa, and I have to ask you this question, of course. Can civil society contest or appeal a presidential pardon if there's a sense that this person does not deserve it?
Well, you can approach any court, like you correctly indicated, South Africa. Anyone can go sue for any reason, including to sue that today is a Friday. But what the Constitutional Court said in President of the Republic of South Africa versus Hugo was that the chances of success in circumstances where a person goes to try and review the decision of the president to pardon are extremely slim. Because the powers so granted to the president in terms of the executive powers in the president are almost unfettered powers.
Yeah.
So in the absence of showing some form of factors that the president would have considered which are not constitutionally justifiable, it is extremely difficult for any civil society or anyone for that matter to approach a court to seek to set aside the decision of the president to pardon anyone. Because, like I've indicated, the powers are almost unlimited in that respect. It is up to the president whether he decides whether or not a person can be pardoned, and that discretion is absolutely his and his alone.
At the discretion of the president, that is what people need to understand in this instance. I thank you very much for joining us. That is Ngobizita Mlilo, a human rights lawyer at Mdluli Attorneys, joining us to talk about, well, presidential pardon that's in the news right now. We're going to take a short commercial break. You're watching Newsroom right here on SABC News.
Macro is going big on festive season savings by bringing you cooking deals like the Brabrantia 7-piece stainless steel cookware set, only 1199, save 300 Rand. We're mixing things up with a Russell Hobbs jug blender for only 599, save 300 Rand. And save 500 Rand on the Russell Hobbs Legacy Breakfast Pack, now only 999. Share in these and other big festive savings for home, for business, for life. Only at Macro, big on life.
Welcome back. You're still with Newsroom here on SABC News. Now, groundbreaking new research on Boko Haram has recently been released, and it was conducted by the Citizen Research Centre here in South Africa. It's the first time researchers have managed to speak directly to former Boko Haram fighters in any number. The paper was released to the United Nations. Now, the Citizen Research Centre is an organisation dedicated to investigating our societies. Now, for more on the research, a little bit earlier, I spoke to the Managing Director of the Citizen Research Centre, Stuart Jones, in Cape Town.
We spoke to 1,600 citizens in Nigeria across 5 different cities. We also spoke to 60 peace builders, as we called them, which were the heads of NGOs that were working towards peace in Nigeria. So they were the counter-narrative to Boko Haram. And then we managed to gain access to internally displaced persons camps in which we were able to speak directly to ex-Boko Haram fighters. And we spoke to 10 of them in depth, and then 120 of them on a quantitative basis where we administered a questionnaire to them. When it comes to the findings, the main finding, and probably the most disturbing one, when we asked people why they had joined Boko Haram, is that 57% of them said that they joined Boko Haram to get revenge against the Nigerian military. And that was a particularly disturbing finding.
Interesting what's come out with regards to the role of women within this organization as well. It wasn't quite what was expected, was it?
Yeah, the traditional view of women in Boko Haram, and we've seen this with Al-Shabaab in Somalia as well, because we do a lot of work around the continent with these kinds of organizations, is that people assume that women play a fairly subservient role within the organizations, basically as wives, euphemistically speaking, or as cooks and support. But what we found here, and at least half our sample was women that we spoke to, was that they were foot soldiers. About 40% of them, I think, were foot soldiers. They were working intelligence, about 20% of them in intelligence, and about 12% of them were working in recruiting. So this has the effect of starting to reevaluate the way that we look at how Boko Haram recruits, and also at how women are being used, if you like, within Boko Haram.
You looked at that recruitment also as part of the study. What were some of the other things that stood out with regards to how people, or how recruitment is done, for that matter?
Yeah, it was really interesting. You know, I think a few assumptions were undermined or shattered, if you like, with the study, given that it was the first time that people had been able to speak directly to Boko Haram members. As far as recruitment goes, the traditional wisdom holds that it happens in mosques, it happens in madrasas, that they're firebrand imams, as we call them, that spread the message and that recruit people. But what we found that it was a far more intimate experience. At least 60% of people that had been recruited into Boko Haram were recruited in their or other people's homes. They were recruited by close friends. They were recruited by family members. They were recruited sometimes by village elders. And so there was very little evidence of firebrand imams and mosque and madrasa recruitment. While mosques were gathering places sometimes in which recruitment did happen, it wasn't happening via the imams in the mosques.
Now, the research you've done happened some months after President Muhammadu Buhari was elected. Have you got any findings around that?
Yeah, it happened, I think, about 3 months after he was elected. It was towards the end of last year that we managed to gain access to these camps. Bear in mind that the people that we spoke to were very much ex-Boko Haram fighters. By virtue of being in these internally displaced persons camps, they're effectively internal refugee camps within the northeast of Nigeria. They had to renounce Boko Haram, and they were going through a rehabilitation process. But of course, what they were speaking about was their experiences in Boko Haram over the previous years. 48% of them had actually voted in the presidential elections, which we found really surprising. And we certainly got the feeling that more might have voted if they hadn't either been with Boko Haram at the time or if they had had the means to vote. And then around 60%, or we would call it a 60% approval rating of President Buhari was evident even amongst Boko Haram members. But trust in all other levels of government was really, really low. And I mean all levels of government, right from municipality level all the way up to national government, was really low. So they had invested their hopes in one person. The implication of this was that Boko Haram members themselves, or rather ex-Boko Haram members themselves, were also keen on seeing Boko Haram eradicated.
Now, staying with that story, Human Rights Watch has accused Nigerian officials also of sexually exploiting women and girls living in camps for victims of Boko Haram in the war-torn northeastern parts of the country. The group says it documented 43 cases of women and girls in 7 internally displaced persons camps in Maiduguri. Now, for more on this, we are joined via Skype by Human Rights Watch Nigerian senior researcher, Mosi Sigan. A very good morning to you, Mosi. Thank you for joining us here on Newsroom.
Good morning.
Mosi, just give us a quick overview. What came out of the Human Rights Watch report?
It was basically that what we found was that the abuses had been going on for a while. Some of the women and girls that we spoke with had children from these abusive relationships and in some cases rape, who were about a year old. This means that, if you extrapolate the length of time it took for the pregnancy to reach term and for them to have the baby, the abuses had been going on for about 2 years. And then we saw those who, the relationships were just about at an end at the time that we got into Maiduguri at the end of July. And so, it is something that is rather widespread. Like I said in that report, we interviewed people from about 7 out of the 13 formal IDP camps. We also heard from several other people that it was happening in other camps, and other institutions have reported that this was indeed the case. But I think that one of the major findings of our research was the fact that quite a good number of the perpetrators were either government officials or members of the civilian vigilante force, as well as security forces, including soldiers and policemen. For us, that was the most disturbing because it then took it, just out of the realm of just common criminality to a human rights abuse and what would amount to a war crime.
What has been the Nigerian government's response thus far with regards to these allegations of, at times, some of their own officials?
I think that in this case, we have been pleasantly surprised by the quick response from the government. And I would say that it probably is due to the fact that as soon as we completed our research at the end of July, we wrote to government authorities, we're informing them about just giving them a summary of our findings and asking them questions and requesting for investigation. We know that one of the authorities that we wrote to, the Ministry of Women Affairs, did carry out investigation. And when we met with her, she told us that she had met with the president, who then ordered her to carry out that investigation. And so when we didn't hear back from her or from anyone else in government, by the end of October, we released our report. And so I think that there was concern in government that although there were authorities of government that knew that this abuse was going on, nothing had happened to put an end to it. But we're glad now that steps are being taken on the order of the president. The Inspector General of Police has set up a panel of investigation. They have reached out to us, and we're doing the best that we can within our own mandate and policies to cooperate with them to carry out the investigations.
And the victims, Mausi, what is happening with the victims now? Are they getting any sorts of counselling or assistance after what has happened now?
Like I said earlier, those that we spoke to are, very likely a small fraction of all of the victims. And so what we have said to the authorities is do not just focus on those that were interviewed by Human Rights Watch, because one, we're also concerned, as are the victims themselves, about their safety and the risks that they might face from any backlash or repercussion by the perpetrators. And so we're doing the best that we can within the circumstances that they find themselves in the IDP camps to protect them. But we do not know that they have received any kind of support, again, because, there are so many security implications. But what we know that the authorities have done is to set up an all-female police squad to go in to replace the male policemen and security agents in the camps. We have asked the authorities to ensure that these female policemen are trained. You cannot assume that, someone who just works a regular beat of police investigations or interrogations can deal with these sensitive sexual violence matters. And so we're hoping, I've heard that they have reached out to NGOs and donors who provide support for those kind of services to ensure that the training happens and that they have support from civil society to do a very sensitive job in the camps.
Thank you very much for joining us today and for bringing this story into the public domain. That's Human Rights Watch Nigeria senior researcher Mausi Sergun talking to us about their report that Nigerian officials have been found guilty of abusing Boko Haram victims in these rescue camps that we've seen. That's the tale of the tape as it is right now. Let's just take a quick roundup of what's on the front pages around the African continent. We start in Angola. Jornal de Angola says that the capital of the province of Kwanza Norte, Ndalandondo, will today host the central event of the 41st anniversary of the country's national independence. Then moving to Lesotho, the Lesotho Times reports that youth leagues of two parties in the governing coalition, including Prime Minister Pagalita Mosisili's Democratic Congress, have joined their opposition colleagues in demanding the Premier to step down with immediate effect. Then in Swaziland, the Swaziland Observer reports that those who are hoping to be employed by government in this financial year will have to wait a bit, as employment of new civil servants has been frozen completely. That's a look around the African continent right now. This is the Newsroom show. After a short break, we will have a sports update with Kendall Makamate. But that's where I will leave you for today.
What was, the week like in terms of CITES?
I saw there was a news insert about there being genetically engineered sort of rhino horns that have been introduced now. And then that is sort of now being rejected. They're saying that it's sort of going to promote poaching as per se.
The concern that's been raised by law enforcement in that particular regard has been that how do you distinguish between the original and the fake?
Yes.
Because it's going to make it difficult to police.
The rhino horn is the same quality as the nail. If you want something from the rhino horn, just cut your nail and do whatever. What was most striking for me was how the pangolin came into the picture. That was interesting for me because a few years ago in Zimbabwe, if you found a pangolin and you handed it over, you would have an audience with the president.
Wow.
Yeah, and you would be given a certain amount of money. And once that program started, almost every week there was somebody who was getting an audience with the president.
Welcome back. We start off this sports bulletin on this beautiful Friday morning with a story that the leaders will tee off on day 2 of the Nedbank Challenge at around midday. Now, race to Dubai leader Hendrik Stenson is in a good position, just a shot off the lead, a 3-way tie at 4 under par. Now, the South African Challenge this morning is being led by Charles Schwartzel. He birdied the first 2 holes and has risen to level par. But South Africans are still looking in strong contention, with George Coetzee and Jaco van Zyl on 3 under, a shot better than Thomas Aiken. Brendan Grace is on 1 under par. Now, the wildlife is still entertaining the fans. There was a baboon that was inspected the greens this morning, and the family of mongooses seen around the world yesterday is still playing on the side of the fairway. Danny Willett also teed off early. The Masters champion needs to do well to keep up his chances of winning the race to Dubai, but he started yesterday with a disappointing 75. And the Proteas will be guarding against complacency as they prepare for the second test match against Australia, starting at the Blundstone Arena in Hobart on Saturday. The Proteas head into the match with the luxury of a 1-0 series lead, but have set their aim on nothing less than a series-winning performance in the Tasmanian capital. Proteas opening batsman Dean Elgar says the team has studied the statistics of the past encounter, but will rely on adjusting on the day, especially with some inclement weather on the radar.
Hearing what people say, the wicket is a little bit different here in Hobart to what we've had in Perth. So it's going to be a bit of adjustment. But I think if it's anything to go by the practice wickets that we've had, it's a good reference point for us going into the test. Chasing a big score like what we set the Australian side is a really difficult feat. It's never been achieved in cricket ever. So I'm not saying because of our dynamics in our batting unit it could have been achieved. I think it's a good thing for us to have quite a lot of array of flexible players within our batting unit. A guy like Ash, I mean, he didn't even contribute much in the first innings, and we know what he can achieve as well. So having a lot of other guys put up their hands and make a big play for the team is very important to us. But yeah, I think it's very important for us to have those different kinds of players within the team. I think it's a good dynamic and a good build for a good batting unit. Trust me, us as a South African unit, we know that the Australian side is still a very dangerous side, and they, I think them being beaten in the first test is definitely working in their favour as well, because they can bounce back, and we're aware of their bounce back ability.
Now, the South African cricket side is on a high after destroying Australia in the first test in Perth just under a week ago. They now move to Hobart, a wicket that's unfamiliar to them, which throws up its own challenges, as Dean Elgar just said. Now, to preview the test is Dumisani Makalima from BC Cricket Analysis. Welcome back to Newsroom. Thanks very much for making the time.
It's a pleasure, Kendall.
Let's talk a little bit about the expectations that everybody goes into this test in Hobart with. Not a lot of people know it well, not even pundits know it well, except for those that are from Australia, of course. What are the expectations from the Proteas team going to this test number 2?
Oh, well, of course, I mean, the obvious one is obviously Dale Steyn being injured, and the likely replacement looking like it's going to be Kyle Abbott. not quite seeing Monemoko come back into it. He needs a couple of games to come back to it. So that's the change that's going to make a difference in the South African side. But regarding the conditions, I mean, I just saw the pitch. It looks quite a green sort of coverage. But I don't think it will be a problem for the South Africans because, I mean, they are a side that does adjust quite quickly.
Interesting that you say it's Kyle Abbott as opposed to Dwayne Pretorius who's been put into the side as cover for Dale Steyn, and that Morkel, not even a late fitness test would get him in. Why Kyle Abbott as opposed to those other two?
I think Kyle Abbott is one of those guys who's been very consistent for the national side. Every time he's gotten his opportunity, I don't see him being left at the side. He's consistent. I mean, he does exactly what the captain asks him. He does exactly what the side needs at the time. He's very consistent, and he hits the good areas. And it usually doesn't go on with a lot of runs. So I think he's the most likely replacement for Dale Steyn.
All right, let's have a quick look. I mean, right now our viewers are looking at visuals from the last test out in Perth. What went right for South Africa that we're hoping goes right again in Hobart?
Listen, I think everything but the first day went right for South Africa. I think they picked themselves up from a very awkward situation in the first day. They came back, the batsmen put their runs on the board, the bowlers actually hit their marks properly. I think the first day they were quite wide of the stumps, which allowed David Warner and Sean Marsh to actually put them away. But I think when they came back the second innings, they actually restricted them. They bowled tight, on the offside, and it was very difficult for the Aussies to score. So that's what they got right.
And with that said, right now we're also looking at what the Cox and the Bavumas and Rabadas were doing to Australia. You've got a little bit of knowledge of some of the key people in this particular test. I mean, you've worked with all three, with the Bavuma, Quinton de Kock, as well as Kagiso Rabada at the Bizhub Lions.
Yeah, no, those three are actually a special trio. Quinton de Kock is an X-factor. He works very hard, in his game. Temba Bavuma is just the same, probably hits more balls than any cricketer that I've come about. So I'm very glad that he's actually doing well, at that level. Kagiso Rabada is very special, and I think he's one of those guys who's going to carry on and do better for South Africa. I just hope that he doesn't get burnt out by the time he's 25 because he's putting in so much work for the national team. But they're a very, very special trio, not actually leaving out Stephen Cook because, he did captain the Lions for a couple of years and also deserves his call-up. It will be a little bit under pressure. He always puts himself under pressure. That's what I expect at the national level. But I think when he gets in, he will put up his numbers on the board. But those three from the Lions, including Stephen Cook, they're very special to the national team.
Let's talk a little bit about those players themselves. I mean, the work that you've done with them. For example, let's look at that run-out that Bavuma effected. Everybody that saw it waxed lyrical about it for several days afterwards. Even now, it's worth talking about. It was right up there as one of the best ever seen in a test cricket match. What do you make of it? I mean, is this something that he's always been good at in terms of his athleticism in the fielding department?
Absolutely. He works very hard in his fielding, Temba. I mean, he's one of those, after training, he will always ask the coach to come hit him a couple of balls, hit the stumps. So it's very special, and I don't take anything away from the people that are saying that it's probably one of the best run-out which they've seen, because it was a game changer. Because if David Warner had stayed on there, you can never rule the game, to go anywhere with David Warner still being there. So it was definitely a game changer, and Temba Bavuma deserves all the credit because the amount of work he puts in his batting, he puts in his fielding. So it was very special to see.
So it was not a surprise for you to actually see him doing this, because you've seen him work hard at it, I could say.
No, not at all. Temba puts in a lot of work in his fielding. He actually enjoys his fielding. I think that's one thing that cricketers, should get themselves used to. You got to enjoy fielding because you spend actually more time on the field than batting or bowling. So he puts a lot of work into his fielding, and I'm just happy for him that he actually hit the stumps because, that has done South Africa a world of good in terms of turning around that test match.
A lot of people are talking about how the old, resilient South Africa has now come back and the newbies that are on the team right now. Are you seeing that? Are you seeing some of that old bite that South Africa has had over the last 20 years or so?
Absolutely. We are becoming a very hard team to beat. We have brought in new players, we have had debutants, and we're still winning matches. We saw that in the one-day series where we brought in a couple of new faces, the Petlukayos, the Dwayne Pretorius, and we still won the series 5-0. Last test, Keshav Maharaj came in, as a debutant, and we were still able to clean up the Aussies. So that's very positive in terms of South Africa, without our star player, Ebi de Villiers, which is very exciting to see, which gives all South Africans a bit of good attitude going into this next test match.
All right, now going to the next test match in Hobart, what do you think is going to work for South Africa? What do they need to do to get it right, to beat in Australia, who will be smarting and looking for double revenge after the 5-0 ODI series whitewashed back here and now all of a sudden losing in Perth?
Absolutely. I think the Aussies are very scarred. They're very scarred. And I think one thing that South Africa needs to do well from the get-go is to get those first innings runs on the board. If they can get those first innings runs on the board, I think their bowling actually backs up everything that they do, you know, as a side in terms of discipline-wise. So I think if we get those first innings runs on the board, I think our bowling attack is very difficult to put away. And we've seen that happen with the Aussies when they were on song. You know, when the likes of Kagiso Rabada, you know, came in and bowled very quickly, it was very difficult for the Aussies to answer those questions. And Kishal Maharaj, I'm sure he'll play again. He plays a very important role on the other side, holding one end, which gives the seamers on the other side, you know, enough time to attack. So I really think South Africa have got their tails up. And it's going to be very hard to Australia for them to come back. I think they're going to question a lot of their batting. You know, they expect the likes of Steve Smith, you know, to be putting up the runs on the board, which hasn't done lately. So it's going to be a very good test match, but I still give South Africa a nod going forward to this game.
All right. Now, with that said, were we to win the test, not the test, the toss, I meant to say. Were we to win the toss, what would you say Faf du Plessis should be trying to do?
I think looking at that pitch, I mean, never been to Hobart, but looking at that pitch, I think it's got a fair amount of grass covering. I think there's a bit of a green top, juicy grass. So I think whoever wins the toss will probably look to bowl first. And I think it won't be a bad idea for South Africa to do that. We've got the bowlers to actually back them. I do think that if they do play Kyle Ebert, he'll be asking questions. He's a bowler who puts the ball up there, asking a lot of questions, allowing the ball to swing and do some movement. Kagiso Rabada, with his pace, will be asking difficult questions to the Aussies. So I think the toss will be very important. I think the team that wins the toss will probably likely to bowl first.
All right, now, thank you very much, Dumisa. I'm looking forward to seeing what it is that the winner of the toss does tomorrow. But once again, like you were right the last time out, you might just be right about Hobart as well. And I hope to speak to you again next week.
Wonderful. Thank you a lot.
There you have it, Dumisa Makalima from BC Cricket Analysis, giving us the lowdown on what to expect in tomorrow's second test out in Hobart, Australia. Now, we've got one or two tweets I'm hoping that we can bring. I don't know if we've got time. I was told that we've run out. If we can bring them up quickly. Dumisa, check this one out. Semstar says, can Saturday get here already? I want to feel the Protea fire heat. A lot of positivity coming out of a lot of fans. If there's another one up as well. And Karabo Kapani, you always make me happy the way you play. Kagiso Rabada. I mean, this guy has actually really stood up, hasn't he?
He's a superstar. He's led the bowling attack, and I think he's led the national side into where they are at the moment, into building up.
No, very good. Now, we're hoping that Kagiso Rabada doesn't disappoint, which he hasn't ever since he started playing for the national side. And that's where we're going to leave it for now. We'll be back at the top of the hour with more news, more analysis, all sorts of previews to bring you in the sporting world. So be sure to stick around. You're watching Newsroom. It's on DSTV4. Don't go anywhere.
Information-hungry viewers stay with SABC News, as issues on the West are different from issues on the East or here in Johannesburg. So it is not surprising that people who follow the news know that there are two things for sure, that anything can happen, and SABC News will tell you when it does. Because we keep the nation fully informed. We are SABC News.
What is a national anthem and why do we need national anthems?
A national anthem becomes an instrument to foster social cohesion, identity, to create a sense of identity of a country.
It does happen that people feel that they cannot commit to what the national anthem does.
Unity is not formed from the sky. People don't just despise the national anthem, but it is because of certain things that are actually happening. The issue of languages, for instance. The issue of apartheid statues and monuments.
Certain choices in life lead us not to our destination. Prostitution will not.
Everything that I used to do then, it was something that I never thought of, I never dreamed of.
One bad choice in life led her to another.
Most of my clients, they used to ask me a question, what am I doing in that industry? Because it does not suit me at all.
Her demons haunted her until she changed her life.
I used to pray that, Lord, if you can deliver me from these drugs, I promise you that I will serve you for the rest of my life.
She has since found peace and is serving her community.
We'll try by all means to spend time with all of our kids.
Join your host, Buleng Mulibati, every Friday at 17:30.
We are one of the 22 high-burden countries, and out of that we're number 6, following countries like India, China, and with huge population.
Cough, night sweats, weight loss and fever, and cough being the most important of those. So, and especially if the cough lasts for more than 3 weeks, then you really have to worry and get tested for TB.
The motivation is to affect behavior change, particularly with people who cough and who may be carrying the bacterium. So encouraging people to use the elbow.
For more on health, join your host Dr. Selo Motaung every Saturday from 9 to 10 a.m.
It's 1100 hours on the 11th of the 11th, 2016. This is Newsroom, Jumbo Africa, and a very warm welcome to the final hour. I'm Elvis Preston. I'll be with you until 12. You have to stay with us as we broadcast live from our Auckland Park studios in Johannesburg, South Africa, to the rest of the African continent. As you know, we're also streaming live on our YouTube show. It's now available there. Our focus today is on insurance and the flash floods that we've seen here in Johannesburg and Gauteng. Question of the day that we're posing to you: are you concerned about insurance payouts after the floods? You can let us know what's on your mind on the Twitter handle at SABC Newsroom, as well as on our Facebook page. But we're also running a poll for you. We're conducting that poll with the question: can the Education Department be held responsible for the exam leaks in Limpopo? Now, there's the poll up there. 88% of you are saying yes, they should be held responsible. 12% are saying no. 22 hours left. We got 108 votes in. You can let us know what's on your mind. But right now, let's first take a look at your news headlines. Several provinces are bracing for further floods as more severe thunderstorms are predicted around the country. Meanwhile, search and rescue teams are still searching for a 3-year-old girl who's believed to have drowned during the flash floods in Alexandra, north of Johannesburg. And protesters turned out for a second day in cities across America to express continued opposition. Beg your pardon, to the incoming President Donald Trump, accusing him of racism, sexism, and xenophobia. Now, those are all your headlines, but before we get to the news, let's find out from Kendall Makamate what's happening on the sports front in the final hour. Kendall?
Thank you very much, Elvis. Quite a lot. It's a massive weekend. Can't wait to get home. And also can't wait for Monday when I talk about everything that happened over the weekend.
Yes.
Yes, it's going to be a good one, I tell you that. Good morning to you. This is what we've got for you in the sports today.
Good stuff.
Day 2 of the Nedbank Golf Challenge, hosted by Gary Players, underway. First off was the trio led by Martin Kema.
Brazil looking to double their advantage. They could well do here. They do. A goal for Neymar.
Brazil slay their World Cup demons in the Estadio Mineiro as they rekindled their Jogo Bonito, thrashing arch rivals Argentina 3-0 in their World Cup qualifier.
We're an ambitious team. We want to be the #1 team in the world. So this game against South Africa on Saturday is another step forward.
To
And the nation holds its breath as all three of South Africa's key senior men's national teams, the Springboks, the Proteas and Bafana Bafana, lock horns with formidable foes this weekend. That is what I'll be bringing to you later on, about 11:30, 11:35. Be sure to stick around. For now, it is back to Elvis, who's got the news.
Thank you, Kendall. Let's stick with our theme story and the main story for this hour. More flooding is possible in several provinces as severe thunderstorms are predicted in and around Gauteng and parts of Mpumalanga, Limpopo, the Northwest, the Free State and KwaZulu-Natal. Emergency teams are already mopping up after thunderstorms accompanied by hail caused havoc around Gauteng. Large parts of Pretoria East were left without water, and an electrical storm caused more flight delays at OR Tambo Airport. Floods have already claimed 4 lives in Alexandra in the north of Johannesburg. Motorists and residents are being warned to avoid low-lying areas.
Local businesses counting the costs of the deluge. Losses estimated to run into millions.
I reckon we should be closed for plus minus a week or two. And, you know, the damages, especially on my wheel alignment machines, that is extreme. It's about over R500,000.
And while some tried to resume operations, this man came back to retrieve his license from his car. A video of this woman watching her car also went viral. Authorities are cautioning residents as more rains are expected.
All our 29 fire stations are on high alert so that when it starts raining, they can respond and attend to life when life needs to be rescued. And we'll also be having our disaster management officials and managers patrolling the hotspots where we know that flooding may take place once it starts raining.
Mopping up operations are continuing. Mahlaku Komane, SABC News, Edenvale.
Meanwhile, a 3-year-old girl who is believed to have drowned during the flash floods in Alexandra, north of Johannesburg, is still missing. The toddler was swept away while she and her father had climbed up a tree to try and escape the raging waters.
A distraught mother waiting for news. Cynthia Chauge's 3-year-old daughter was washed away by the flash floods on Wednesday. The child presumed dead.
We survived after climbing over our home and then onto a tree. After 30 minutes, a tree branch broke off and our child fell into the floods and died.
Search and rescue divers were roped in.
Our swiftwater rescue team has been in the water and along the river banks just to check if maybe not he's alongside the river banks or even inside. We've traveled about 3 kilometers and we're still going to continue.
Around the settlement, a trail of destruction. Residents here picking up the pieces. Many have lost their homes.
I have nothing, just my 3-month-old baby. I lost everything in the floods.
This footage shows the destructive force of the torrent water. Shacks uprooted and cars swept away. Humanitarian group Gift of the Givers also stepped in. Siswetla is built along a flood line, but provincial government says there are plans to move residents to a safer area.
We are going to continue to remove. We'll probably have to fence off this area and put signs that people should not trespass, because you can see even on the other side of the river that people have really built on what is a flood line.
Authorities say those affected will be housed in temporary shelters in the area.
We had some very warm conditions coming in, which lasted quite a long time. And convection built up, and we saw strong low-pressure systems coming along the eastern coastline, which just added to that. And all in all, we just got strong convection, which is rising air. The faster the air rises, the bigger the the storm will be effectively. And up here we have a lot of dust in the air, causes a lot of electrical activity. So what we just saw was a lot of rainfall in a very short period of time. That's what leads to the flash flooding.
Yeah, I mean, I'm seeing articles and headlines reading a once-in-a-century storm hits Joburg.
Yeah.
I mean, is it that rare here in Joburg? Could we see it happening? Because I know there's a lot of predictions for a lot more rain to come, but to that extent is the question we're asking.
Look, I'm not going to say that it's not going to happen in the next 100 years. It is more than likely to happen in the next 100 years. And we have seen rainfall this bad in the last 100 years. If you recall, just a few years ago, 2 or 3 years ago, we saw very intense, massive hailstones falling, a huge hail shower that fell in the east rand of Johannesburg as well. And people are saying the same thing about that. So events like this are happening, and they're happening more regularly, and that is, unfortunately, a symptom of climate change.
Insurance companies, meanwhile, have been inundated with claims following flash floods here in Gauteng. Companies and the clients can expect a delay due to the backlog caused by large volumes of claims being processed. For many people, the only way to come back from this disaster would be if insurance companies honour their contracts. Now, for more on insurance, we were earlier joined by an insurance expert, Lizette Erasmus from IntegriSure.
I'm quite surprised about the comment that there are claims being declined already. But in terms of your comprehensive cover, it's always wise to understand what is the terminology in terms of comprehensive cover, what insured perils are covered. Because insurance cover provides cover for accidental, unforeseen events, of which your natural disasters, your storm, flood, hail, lightning is usually part of. So in terms of the cover that we provide, yes, it's definitely covered. The major thing is for anybody who enters into a short-term insurance contract is to make sure that they understand the cover that they're purchasing, what it entails, what your excesses would be in the event of a loss, and also what steps are required to be taken as soon as a loss has occurred. For us, obviously, it is to assist the client to prevent any further losses and to minimize the loss as quickly as possible.
Lizette, do you think South Africans understand the insurance contracts, and do you think people sort of do enough research when they go into a relationship with an insurer?
I don't think consumers familiarise themselves enough or take enough time to read their wordings and to understand the cover. You know, it is almost, I want to say, a grudge purchase for the reason that you don't see the cover or the product that you're purchasing, and you only experience your product once you have a claim. And if you have not familiarized your cover and you understand what you're covered for and what it will happen at a point of a claim, you then very often have clients that are disappointed because of the fact that they haven't done their homework. They have gone for the cheapest option, which is in some cases costs you extra money at the end of the day. So it's very important for you to understand, do comparisons in the market, to familiarize yourself in order to make sure that you have the best combination of the product, the price, and the service at the end of the day.
Now, Lizette, over the next couple of weeks and months to come, there's no doubt there are going to be quite a few claims that are going to be declined. That's just the nature of the business. But those people who are on the wrong side of this torrent, as it were, what alternatives do they have?
My advice to any insurance consumer whose claim was rejected by the insurer is to firstly follow the internal complaints resolution, which should be available, and it must be easily accessible to the consumer. And the next step then would be to consult the short-term insurance ombud. It is free of charge. The information should be on all consumers' short-term insurance policy schedule. It's a requirement that the information must be reflected there. It's free of charge, and they then can lodge a complaint, and the ombud will then investigate the complaint, and he is totally impartial in this whole process, and he will then evaluate, get information from the insurer, and he will make a ruling in terms of this specific case.
Now, Lizette, if you could leave us today with one gold nugget to keep in mind during all of this as an expert, what would that gold nugget be?
Please make sure that you update your cover on an annual basis. Review your sums insured, especially in terms of buildings. Consumers do not take into account the impact of inflation as well as the change in exchange rate. So please make sure that you're adequately insured. Your sum insured is enough to replace the property that has been lost or damaged.
Sure that you properly covered with your insurance. Phone them up and find out, because if you're not, you may lose. Now, the EFF may approach the courts over the use of secret ballots on motions of no confidence. The party's proposal for a secret ballot on a DA motion against the President Jacob Zuma in the National Assembly yesterday was turned down. That motion rejected by 214 votes against 126. A total of 58 MPs did not vote.
Honourable members, the voting summary is as follows. The yes is 126, the no's is 214, abstain is 1, not voted 58. Yeah.
With that announcement, the DA motion of no confidence in President Zuma was defeated. Earlier, DA leader tried to persuade his colleagues to vote for the motion, and as he put it, and save the country from the brink of collapse.
If you choose Mr. Jacob Zuma ahead of your country, you will live with the consequences of your decision. A vote against this motion is a vote for state capture. It is a vote for corruption. It is a vote for theft. It is a vote for power abuse.
The ruling party has, however, rejected his plea.
The DA and its allies know very well that this motion is ill-conceived and bound to fail, and have only raised it to denigrate and undermine the person and dignity of President Zuma.
But opposition parties were unanimous in their support for the removal of President Zuma.
A movement that has stood for 104 years is crumbling, and is taking South Africa with it. All this for the sake of one man. I do not want to see my country destroyed. Neither do I wish to see the ANC crumble. It's the part of my youth, started by my own uncle, Dr. Pixley Sen. It's a part of my mentor, Ingos Albert Lutul.
Many South Africans have long lost confidence in the leadership of this monumentally flawed president. We also heard from, amongst others, the mouth of the ANC chief whip, that many branches of his party have also lost confidence in his leadership and are calling for his removal.
Although the motion was defeated, several opposition parties say it's not over yet. Others threatened court cases, while others called upon civil society organizations and the general public to also make their views known on this matter. Manilisi Tubase, SABC News, Parliament.
Former public protector advocate Thuli Madonsela maintains she did the right thing by releasing audio and transcripts of interviews between her and the President Jacob Zuma before the release of the State of Capture report. Madonsela was speaking at the opening of a two-day Governance and Ethics for African Development conference in Stellenbosch.
I interdicted it because she was going to issue a report, having not talked to me or asked me questions. And it is within my right, it is in fact within the act of the public protector that those who are to be questioned, they have a right to do what I've done.
This statement by the President last month led to an ethical dilemma for Thuli Madonsela. She says she could have issued a statement refuting the President's claims, but she opted to release the transcript of a meeting with him to allow the nation to decide for itself.
I had a choice to issue a media statement to say this person is lying. That was right, but there are ethics again about calling people liars. I had to think through those things, and I eventually said to my team, I was still public protector then, the best right in this particular case is that we are going to issue these records.
The presidency has since complained to the Public Protector's Office, seeking clarity on its policy regarding the release of transcripts. Madonsela was in Stellenbosch to
two-day Governance and Ethics for African Development Conference. She and former Judge Mervyn King were also recipients of the Order of Baobab Awards by the Business Ethics Network, Africa. Lukhanyo Chalada, SABC News, Parliament.
The African National Congress in the Western Cape has cautioned party leaders against making public statements about internal issues. This follows the suspension of provincial chairperson Marius Fransman for 5 years.
The charges relates to what the committee referred to as the abuse of his office by trying to get a sexual favour from a 21-year-old woman who accused him of harassment. The second is for bringing the ANC into disrepute for making public statements. The NDC also accused Fransman of failing to attend a disciplinary hearing, adding that he'd shown no remorse for his misconduct.
We need to start appreciating that ANC works according to structures. If a particular structure is going to handle a matter, whether it's an integrity commission, whether it's the NTC, NWC, we have to wait until that particular structure has concluded its work and not be tempted to go outside that structure. So that's the first lesson.
Criminal charges against Fransman were earlier dropped by the MPA due to insufficient evidence. The sexual harassment allegations stem from a trip Fransman undertook with Louisa Wynand to the ANC's birthday celebrations in Rustenburg earlier this year. The party has praised him for his work in the organisation.
Marius Fransman, people who've worked with him for over 20 years of unbroken service, we have to thank him. He's done a great job. One of the highlights of his work was the fact that he rallied the organisation behind some sectors, clubs, churches.
The complainant says in a statement that she's relieved with the outcome of the disciplinary process. Fransman could not be reached for comment. Carmel Lochmerk-Roberts, SABC News, Cape Town.
South Africa is currently facing severe blood shortages. Donations in the past 2 months have dropped significantly. Universities and schools contribute about 40% of blood per year. Now, it is believed that the current feast must fall protest has hampered the South African National Blood Services supply.
Doing their bit for a good cause. These donors' key responsibility is to save lives. To donate, one must weigh at least 50 kilograms or more, must be between 16 and 64 years, in good health and sexually safe lifestyle.
As a responsible citizen of this country, and knowing that there's a big need for blood all over South Africa, and specifically this time of the year, I just believe and I accepted the fact that it's my responsibility to donate blood.
I know that in South Africa they need 3,000 units blood per day, and I know that my 500 that I donate can save 3 lives.
I work in the police force, and you see the accidents that happen, and there's always people that needs blood for operations, in accidents, or whatever the case may be.
The Kimberley branch, like many others, also experience a shortage.
At the moment, we've got really shortage in Kimberley branch. Our target is 322 units per week, but we don't reach that target. When we go out to our mobile clinics, where we got a target for 20 units, we only came back with 10 or 12 units at the moment.
With an increase of accidents during the festive season, a call has been made to those who qualify as blood donors to visit their local blood service branch. Reginald Witboy, SABC News, Kimberley.
In news abroad, the U.S. President Barack Obama and President-elect Donald Trump held a 90-minute meeting at the White House in their first public step towards a peaceful transition of power. The meeting comes after the Republican businessman's surprise election victory. Obama said the two men spoke about foreign and domestic policy, as well as the upcoming transition of power. Trump, elected on Tuesday, said that he looked forward to more meetings with Obama and said several matters were discussed. Later, Trump met with Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell on Capitol Hill. Addressing reporters after the meeting, Trump said his top 3 priorities were immigration, healthcare, and big league jobs. Dozens of anti-Trump protesters, meanwhile, gathered outside the White House to demonstrate against Trump's triumph. Thousands of people have been taking to the streets in at least 10 U.S. cities chanting, "Not my president" and "No Trump" since Tuesday's White House upset.
Information-hungry viewers stay with SABC News, as issues on the West are different from issues on the East or here in Johannesburg. So it is not surprising that people who follow the news know that there are two things for sure: that anything can happen, and SABC News will tell you when it does. Because we keep the nation fully informed. We are SABC News.
We are one of the 22 high-burden countries, and out of that we're number 6, following countries like India, China, and with huge population.
Cough, night sweats, weight loss and fever, and cough being the most important of those. So, and especially if the cough lasts for more than 3 weeks, then you really have to worry and get tested for TB.
The motivation is to affect behavior change, particularly with people who cough and who may be carrying the bacterium. So encouraging people to use the elbow.
For more on health, join your host Dr. Selo Motaung every Saturday from 9 to 10 a.m.
Welcome back. We start off the sports bulletin by bringing you a little bit on the golfing news, where the leaders will tee off on day 2 at the Nedbank Challenge around about midday. The race to Dubai leader Hendrik Stenson is in a good position, just one shot off the lead, a 3-way tie at 4 under par. Now, the South African Challenge this morning is being led by Charles Schwartzel. He birdied the first 2 holes and has risen to level par. But the South Africans are still looking in strong contention, with George Coetzee and Jaco van Zyl on 3 under, a shot better than Thomas Aiken. Brendan Grace is on 1 under par. The wildlife is still entertaining the fans, and a baboon inspected the greens this morning, and the family of mongooses, seen around the world yesterday, is still playing on the side of the fairway. Danny Willett has also teed off early. The Masters champion needs to do well to keep up his chances of winning the race to Dubai, but he started yesterday with a disappointing 75. And Banyana received a boost in confidence ahead of the African Women's Championship with a comprehensive 3-0 victory over Zimbabwe in an international friendly in Harare. There was a brace of goals from Thembi Kgatlana, one on either half of some heavy downpours halfway through the game. A further goal from Leandra Smeda, a header, ensured Banyana the win. The team are building up to the Continental Championships that will be hosted by Cameroon from November 19. This was coach Desiree Ellis' second win in as many matches. Banyana beat Egypt 3-1 in Ellis' first match in charge last month. South Africa in Group A, together with host Cameroon, Egypt and Zimbabwe, while Group B consists of Nigeria, Mali, Ghana and Kenya. Now, certainly hoping to bring you news of that thrashing that Argentina got meted out to them by their arch rivals Brazil, but it seems that that clip is not ready. Now, the Springboks have made several changes to their match 23 to face England at Twickenham in London tomorrow. It will kick off at 4:30 South African time tomorrow. Adrian Strauss returns to captain the team after being rested against the Barbarians. Free State Cheetahs captain Francois Venter will make his test debut at centre after impressing last weekend.
There are 5 starting 15 survivors from the Barbarians' draw. Francois Venter is in line to get his first Springbok cap. Pat Lambie and Rudy Page are retained as the halfback pairing, while Tendai Mtawarira and Peter Steph du Toit are the constants amongst the forwards. although Du Toit is at flank alongside Willem Alberts. And it's a replacements bench light on experience, with just 47 test caps amongst the 8 subs. Johan Goosen is the most experienced, with 10 caps. The Boks are facing a completely different England side from a year ago, when they were dumped out of their own World Cup in the group stages. Under Eddie Jones, this team has achieved a Six Nations Grand Slam and a series whitewash over Australia. The Boks only won twice in the Rugby Championship. Simon Burke, SABC News.
Now, the Proteas will be guarding against complacency as they prepare for the second test match against Australia, starting at the Blundstone Arena in Hobart on Saturday. The Proteas head into the match with the luxury of a 1-0 series lead, but have set their aim on nothing less than a series-winning performance in the Tasmanian capital. Proteas opening batsman Dean Elgar says the team has studied the statistics of past encounters, but will rely on adjusting on the day, especially with some inclement weather on the radar.
Hearing what people say, the wicket is a little bit different here in Hobart to what we've had in Perth. So it's going to be a bit of adjustment. But I think if it's anything to go by the practice wickets that we've had, it's a good reference point for us going into the test. Chasing a big score like what we set the Australian side is a really difficult feat. It's never been achieved in cricket ever. So I'm not saying because of our dynamics in our batting unit it could have been achieved. I think it's a good thing for us to have quite a lot of array of flexible players within our batting unit. A guy like Ash, I mean, he didn't even contribute much in the first innings, and we know what he can achieve as well. So having a lot of other guys put up their hands and make a big play for the team is very important to us. But yeah, I think it's very important for us to have those different kinds of players within the team. I think it's a good dynamic and a good build for a good batting unit. Trust me, us as a South African unit, we know that the Australian side is still a very dangerous side, and they, I think them being beaten in the first test is definitely working in their favour as well, because they can bounce back, and we're aware of their bounce back ability.
Batsmen are sharing the spoils on day 3 of the first cricket test match against England in Rajkot. In reply to the visitors' first innings total of 537, the Indians had reduced the deficit to 309 runs by tea time. The hosts lost just 1 wicket this morning as Cheteshwar Pujara and Murali Vijay's unbeaten 160-run second wicket partnership guided the hosts to 228 for the loss of 1 wicket. Now here's some of the highlights.
3 men in the covers on the offside. Oh, good delivery. And finger goes up. Will the Indians review this?
Down the pitch. They're not letting Ansari settle. That's been belted out the ground. 100 comes up in some style for India.
Excellent footwork. And not for the first time in this innings. He's used to his feet. He's got to his half century in a fantastic manner. Vijay. Glorious again. He loves this area. Pujara outside off stump and generally gets into a very good position. And half century for Pujara as well.
Nice little paddle sweep. Those 2 men in the deep are quite square on the leg side. And there's an opportunity to score fine.
Okay, so win in Brazil on Sunday, the 13th of November, and win the Formula 1 title. Nico Rosberg's task seems quite simple enough, but it's a lot harder to achieve. The German is 1 step away from securing his first championship, which he will do if he wins at Interlagos, regardless of where Mercedes teammate, triple champion and title rival Lewis Hamilton finishes. The odds are in Rosberg's favour. He's won for the past 2 seasons from pole position Sao Paulo, whereas the anti-clockwise circuit is yet to reward Hamilton with a single victory.
Yeah, feeling great, of course, because it's awesome to be fighting for the World Championship with 2 races to go. And yeah, so excited about the weekend, looking forward to it, and of course going to try and go for the win.
And Lewis?
Yeah, well, I've had lots of great or mixed experiences here, so it's a real challenge to come here and try and win for the first time. Something that Nico and obviously Felipe has experienced in the past. So that's my goal, and nothing really to lose.
That story that I promised you a little earlier on, Brazil have stunned Argentina in the 2018 World Cup qualifier, beating them 3-0 at the venue where the Seleção lost 7-1 to Germany in the 2014 FIFA World Cup. The Brazilians were just too good for the Lionel Messi-led side, as coach Tite extended his winning streak since he took over the reins.
It's a matchup that's probably unrivaled, and when they're playing for World Cup points, it just makes it extra special.
Brazil came into the match against Argentina looking to extend their good run under coach Tite. They also wanted to erase the bad memory of suffering a heavy defeat in Belo Horizonte as they returned to the city for the first time since they were pummeled by Germany. Argentina were chasing shadows from the word go. Felipe Coutinho was first to score for the home side with a trademark rocket from range.
Coutinho, what a goal! That's why his Liverpool teammates think he's the best player in the Premier League.
And at the stroke of half-time, Argentina's defense was split wide open, allowing Neymar to double Brazil's advantage with his 50th goal in national team colours.
They could well do here, they do! Argentina's defense split wide open.
Early in the second half, Argentina tried to cut down the deficit, but in vain. Messi, who returned to the side after being sidelined by injuries, was anonymous in the match, lit up by brilliant moments from the home side. A deflected goal by former Tottenham Hotspur strongman Paulinho handed Brazil coach Tite his 5th win since taking over from Dunga earlier this year.
Paulinho, 3-0.
Argentina haven't won in 4 qualifiers now and are outside the qualifying spot. The defeat left the Argentinians 6th in the qualifying group, 8 points behind Brazil.
Fabulous performance from Brazil.
Brazil have been a marvel to watch under Tite, surging to the top of South American Confederation. And what's better than a win over your biggest rivals and leaving them in danger of failing to qualify for the next World Cup? Mduduzi Ndlovu, SABC News.
Anybody who knows me knows that I'm a big fan of the La Selección, the Albiceleste, Los Argentinos. But anyway, didn't go down too well for me. But this is why I hand over to Elvis, who's about to chat to comedy royalty, one Kurt Schoenraad.
Muito obrigado, senhor. Por favor. Now you're crying. For why you're crying?
For Albiceleste.
Well, it's not the laughing matter, but here is a laughing matter we got for you. Now, from pop-up comedies, one-hit wonders, South Africa's favorites, and the world's greatest, the Cape Town Comedy Club has been entertaining people for more than 10 years. Can you believe it? And it was recently listed as one of the top 10 comedy clubs in the world. The owner of the Cape Town Comedy Club and top South African comedian Kurt Schoenraad now joins us from our Cape Town studios to tell us more. Very good morning to you, Kurt, and welcome.
Good morning. Hi. Thanks for having us.
You must be excited. How does it feel to be listed as one of the top 10 comedy clubs in the world? So you must be laughing all the way to the bank.
I wish that part is soon to follow, I hope. You know, up to this stage, we've been very lucky to find the perfect home for it in Cape Town, and I've been lucky enough to get really good support from comedians and friends in the comedy industry from all parts of the world. I'm very lucky. I'm fortunate. I feel very happy to be in this space. Thankful, and I live in a beautiful city. I'm chuffed. We're doing well. Thank you.
Take us back to the days to Yomasa Club or Yomasa Comedy Club, and then the transformation, of course, to the mother of all clubs. Has it been an easy journey or not?
Definitely. I mean, it's been a very interesting and purposeful journey, but it wasn't always easy. Back then, we just needed to find a home for comedy in Cape Town, or I'd faced the challenge of either building something in Cape Town or moving to Johannesburg. And there was already a thriving industry down there, and I wanted to live in Cape Town. So we started the Yomasa Comedy Club, and that was a great underground kind of vibe we had there. And comedians from all over the world would come and play with us, whoever came through Cape Town. And that just formalized a little more as time went on. And then about 4 years ago, I walked past the venue in the waterfront, thought it was the absolute perfect room for stand-up. I approached the waterfront, and thankfully they trusted in my vision for it. And now it's one of the top 10 comedy clubs in the world. I'm very happy it worked out the way it did.
What would you attribute your success to?
I reckon my parents, good work ethic, good community, and good mentors. I've been very lucky. I've been very lucky to have really good people to guide me through, particularly what not to do. You know, well, even though I challenged that a little bit, but I think good help. I think this is why communities are so important in raising people, not just families, but communities are.
And what about the success of the club? What would you attribute that to? Is it just about it's being in Cape Town and close to the waterfront, or are there other contributing factors?
Oh, there are many contributing factors. I've got a great team of people who keep it together and make it really nice to be there. And from caterers to managers to people who keep it together. I just face it a lot of the time. And there's the waterfront, of course, and then there's also the support from the comedy industry, comedians who come out and take ownership of the space. And we couldn't possibly have pulled it off without them, you know.
Now, we know that you are a great comedian. I watched you a couple of weeks ago here in Johannesburg when you're doing Proudly Coloured here in Joburg. So you are a great comedian. Is that part of the attraction as well for the club?
Well, let's just say I'm a comedian, and the club is designed. The club is designed for comedy by comedians. It's the only room I know of in the world that is literally designed exclusively for comedy and absolutely nothing else. I'm pretty sure there are others that exist, but this is the only one I know of, and it is just that. I mean, when you come to the space, you really understand it. It's not just about the comedy. The lights, the sound, the vibe, the people, and that is most satisfying, is to walk, to just watch that unfold and have people bring their friends back next week, and they bring their friends back, and so on and so forth. And it's really gathered pace that way, more than anything else, I think.
So for yourself, Kurt, as from countrywide comedy tours, TV presenting, and even an appearance in a movie, what's next for you?
Well, you know, I'd like to do some more movies in front and behind the camera. I think that's what I'd like to spend the rest of my life doing, shooting movies, man. We've got some fantastic stories, and I'd like to tell some of them, you know, both in front and behind the camera. And, of course, the Comedy Club will help us kind of foster a good gene pool of young comedians / actors who can help us do that.
So give me a stint of the most memorable moment at the Cape Town Comedy Club.
Oh, well, we've had so many, you know, we've had so many. We've had some big stars, international stars come through there. We had a huge superstar called Michael Mittermeier, who was one of Eddie Izzard's side guys, play there not too long ago. Also, you know, Trevor Noah played there when he was still an open micer, you know. So, yeah, it's had very interesting moments. I remember climbing into somebody in the front row over there and having a good old time with him, and then finding out that was the critic sent to crit the show. So, yeah, there's been interesting times, but it was great. It always ended well. It was never done maliciously, and, you know, people enjoy it. It's really a great night out.
Kurt, I wish you all the best of luck, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much for having us. Cheers.
That was Kurt Squinrad. He's a comedian as well as the club owner of the Cape Town Comedy Club. Right now, the President, Jacob Zuma, is meeting with the Botswana President, Insereti Khama. Let's go there live.
You are all welcome to the third session of the South Africa-Botswana Binational Commission. I now have the honor